Chapter 305. He held the Source-type Extreme token in his palm so that when he encountered danger he could immediately release the Moonlight domain in the Extreme token as long as he exerted a little force. In the Endless Forest this time, Lin Yuan did not let the Source Sand create a large amount of sand underground. If the Source Sand wantonly created sand in the depths of the Endless Forest, it would attract the attention of the high-grade Fays in the Endless Forest. There were also powerful Fays living under the Endless Forest's land. If it wantonly created sand in such a natural environment in the wild, it would really be no different from courting death. The Mother of Bloodbath had originally planned to sacrifice itself to protect Lin Yuan when it encountered danger. However, after knowing that Lin Yuan had the Extreme token from the Moon Empress, if the Mother of Bloodbath really fought with the Suzerain/Myth-breed Fae, it would not worry about Lin Yuan's safety. In fact, it might even be in a desperate situation. If Lin Yuan crushed the Extreme token, not only could he protect himself, but he might even save the Mother of Bloodbath's life. At the same time, the Mother of Bloodbath let Lin Yuan go over because he was at best a C-rank spirit chi professional with a weak aura. Moving in the depths of the Endless Forest would not attract the attention of that Suzerain/Myth-2 Dark-type avian Fae. Before he got close, Lin Yuan saw a beautiful tree that was nearly 30 meters tall. This 30-meter-tall tree was not conspicuous in the depths of the Endless Forest, where the average tree height was 50 meters. However, when Lin Yuan saw this tree he was shocked. He felt as if he was in a dreamy scene and saw a beautiful and dreamy tree. This tree looked a bit like a banyan tree, but unlike a banyan tree, this tree had countless pink-purple flowers that looked like hydrangeas. Each of these embroidered ball-like flowers was made up of small flowers. A large cluster of pink-purple flowers was gently bunched together and bloomed between the branches. Many tree vines hung down from the branches, and these tree vines were full of hydrangeas flowers that emitted a sparkling pink-purple halo. However, at that moment, there was a large triangular hole on the tree trunk with hydrangeas. This hole looked like it had been violently pecked through by a bird's beak. The triangular hole still had remnants of dark energy slowly corroding the tree trunk. The center of the trunk where the tree core was stored was completely hollowed out. This plant Suzerain/Myth-breed Fae was rapidly gathering vitality in an attempt to mend the hole in the tree trunk and the tree core that had been dug out. However, the dark energy collided with the life force that was trying to fill the hole. Under the tree, which was full of pink and purple hydrangeas, a woman in a pink and purple dress was clutching her chest. He angrily glared at the middle-aged man in the air, who was holding a jade-green crystalline tree core in his hand. Lin Yuan sensed dense darkness energy from the middle-aged man holding the crystalline tree core in midair. This smell was the same as the black essence blood that the Mother of Bloodbath had given him and the phoenix perching Chinese parasol tree. However, this middle-aged man with a triangular scar at the corner of his eye merely had a similar aura to the middle-aged man who had ambushed Lin Yuan in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. There were no other similarities. This middle-aged man's aura was many times stronger than that of the middle-aged man in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. This was Lin Yuan's first time facing a Suzerain/Myth-breed enemy. Moreover, it was Lin Yuan's first time facing a Suzerain/Myth-breed enemy, and it was a pinnacle Myth-2 Fae. Although the woman in the pink and purple dress had an angry face, her temperament had an indescribable sense of benevolence. Although this woman in the pink and purple dress looked very young, the corners of her eyes drooped as if she loved all the living beings around her. This woman in the pink and purple dress should be the human form of this Suzerain/Myth-breed plant Fae. Although plant Faes could transform into human form at Suzerain/Myth-2, their roots grew underground. However, as plant Faes' roots grew underground, those plant Faes that relied on their roots to absorb nutrients from the ground couldn't move their roots easily. Therefore, to some extent, plant Faes moving their roots was a kind of behavior that caused harm to their roots. Therefore, plant Faes could only transform into human form when they were at Suzerain/Myth-2. They could only transform into human form with the huge spiritual energy contained in plant Faes, and their human form could not be too far away from their main body. Only when a plant species Fae reached Myth-3 would it be able to transform into a human form with spiritual energy. Instead, they could transform into human form like animal Faes and integrate into human society. There was a pinkish-purple law rune hovering above the head of that 30-meter-tall Suzerain/Myth-breed plant Fae that was full of flowers. This pink-purple law rune was like a petal-shaped law rune that was constantly fusing with pink and purple petals. This petal-shaped law rune was different from the blood power contained in the Mother of Bloodbath's red crystal-shaped law rune. This pink-purple petal-shaped law rune was emitting a kind of power that was different from spiritual energy but very similar. If spiritual energy was the power that acted on the brain, then the power emitted by this pink-purple petal-shaped law rune was a kind of power that acted on the mind. This kind of power was a kind of enlightenment power. This kind of enlightenment power seemed to be able to give something wisdom or enlighten something. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly knew that there was a chance to improve Red Thorn's quality in the depths of the endless forest that the Mother of Bloodbath had mentioned. It should be referring to the power emitted by this suzerain/myth-breed law rune. At that moment, a hole suddenly appeared in the sky. This hole was like the originally calm blue sky had suddenly collapsed and all the blue flowed toward the hole. A brownish-red color containing a destructive aura poured out of this hole. Upon seeing the change in front of him, Lin Yuan understood that this should be the world cleansing that was about to arrive. A world cleansing started from the collapse of the sky. In just a moment, the brownish-red color containing a destructive aura poured out and burned half the sky. The destructive brownish-red flame power was concentrated on the head of this plant suzerain/myth fae. In midair, the pinnacle suzerain/myth 2 avian fae that had transformed into a middle-aged man with a triangular scar under the corner of his eye looked particularly sinister under that sinister gaze. End of this chapter. Chapter 306. Crow looked at the woman in the pink-purple dress and said cruelly, "I hope you can survive the world cleansing before you die. I hope you can survive the world baptism before you die. If you can't, I can help you. Otherwise, I won't be able to obtain the world grace after the world baptism." Just as Crow laughed maniacally and was about to lose its vigilance, suddenly, a red crystal-like blood-red law rune floated above the Mother of Bloodbath's head. A strange and pleasant cold voice rang out. "Blood law, use blood as a blade and the blade pierces the heart." The Mother of Bloodbath's cold voice sounded. The woman in the pink-purple dress, who had been desperate and angry under the tree, had pleasant surprise and sorrow on her face. This emotion suddenly collided with Lin Yuan's eyes, and for some reason his heart suddenly clenched. Although this emotion seemed complicated, the meaning was very simple. It was the pleasant surprise of seeing an old friend and the sorrow of her impending death. At the same time, Crow's scream sounded in midair. This scream was abnormally mournful, as if it had suffered great pain. Crow's body seemed to suddenly shrink, and the position of its heart seemed abnormally swollen under the shrinking of its body. At that moment, the Mother of Bloodbath's strange and pleasant cold voice sounded again. "Blood law, heart and blood as a blade, 10,000 blades repel." Crow's wrinkled humanoid body began to tremble violently. It was as if something would break out of its body at any time. The Mother of Bloodbath's blood law rune's power and energy were fully displayed at that moment without any restraint. When Crow felt this blood law rune's energy, the expression on its face instantly became complicated. Anger and resentment filled Crow's mind. Crow only wanted to attack the Mother of Bloodbath with all its strength and kill it. At that moment, the woman in the pink-purple dress did not care about the world cleansing pouring down from the sky. Instead, she chose to recall her pink-purple petal-shaped law rune. A kind and gentle voice suddenly rang out. "Enlightenment law, mind seal, heart stop." Immediately after, the embroidered balls formed by the pink-purple flowers all fell from the tree. When they landed on the ground, they splashed into a rain of flowers. Each petal was like a chaotic blade that could cut through the surging mortal world. The sudden rain of red flowers fell on the crows, who had become lifeless the moment the woman in the pink-purple palace dress spoke of the spiritual pause. The rain of red flowers began to cut the skin of the crowman's body. Immediately after, the black blood that had been gushing out of Crow's body shot out from the holes that had been cut open. The ink-colored blood also contained crushed jelly-like solids. Come to think of it, it should be the heart that was crushed by the blood. However, in the instant that the black blood spurted out, Crow's spirit had already recovered. However, strangely, Crow did not resist immediately, its face ashen. Because the Crow knew he couldn't make it. Crow, who was at the peak of suzerain/myth 2, could clearly feel the degree of damage to his body and the loss of his life. But that wasn't what the Crow was concerned about. All Crow could think about was the sacred source life form in the sea that he had yet to retrieve. Although he knew he was about to die, fear still surged uncontrollably in Crow's heart. At that moment, Crow turned from his human form into a strange black bird that was less than the size of Lin Yuan's forearm. This strange bird looked no different from an ordinary crow. However, its fur was darker as though it could blend into the night at any time. Lin Yuan used true data to check the corpse of this dead peak of suzerain/myth 2 crow species Fae. He found out that this crow species Fae was called the Night Calamity Crow. This was the first time he had seen the death of a suzerain/myth breed Fae. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. The mother of Bloodbath had assassinated the crow when it was least expecting it, but the crow's death had been a result of the mother of Bloodbath. More importantly, the suzerain plant Fae that was about to break through to Myth 3 had suddenly attacked. Otherwise, Lin Yuan could also see that the sudden attack of a power offense-type Fae like the mother of Bloodbath. Even though the Night Calamity Crow had been severely injured during the sneak attack, it was not enough to kill it. However, it was not enough to kill the suzerain/myth 2 Night Calamity Crow. A suzerain/myth breed Fae at the peak of Myth 2. At this moment the curtains had already fallen. However, at that moment the heaven and earth cleansing's brownish-red karmic fire had already burned the suzerain/myth plant Fae's body. The woman in the pink-purple palace dress who had already withdrawn the willpower rune, was now unable to resist this heaven and earth cleansing. The branches turned from green to yellow at a speed visible to the naked eye. The mother of Bloodbath hurriedly turned into a human form and went forward. It picked up the tree core beside the Night Calamity Crow's corpse and threw it to the girl in the pink-purple palace dress. Big Sister Xia quickly fused with the tree core. I'll help you resist this heaven and earth cleansing. The girl in the pink-purple palace dress looked at the mother of Bloodbath with only joy and calmness on her face. I originally thought that I would be able to leave the endless forest to find you after breaking through to Myth 3, but I didn't expect such an unforeseen event to happen. However, even if I can't leave this forest, I still met you in the end. The mother of Bloodbath's crimson eyes glowed with a crystal-clear mist. The mother of Bloodbath seemed to see a weak spider and a young sapling living together for countless years. The sapling provided the spider with a hiding place and sheltered from the summer heat. The spider helped the sapling expel the leaf-eating pests. The young spider and the delicate sapling supported each other just like that. Until one day both of them reached the bronze level, then the silver level and finally the gold level. In the end both of them became myth breeds. The mother of Bloodbath thought that if it hadn't experienced its first heaven and earth cleansing when it became a myth breed, the Moon Empress had saved it and helped it break through to Myth I. In order to repay her kindness, it would have probably stayed in the endless forest. Perhaps it would have already turned into a wisp of smoke under the heaven and earth cleansing. The woman in the pink-purple palace dress didn't care about this heaven and earth cleansing that was burning her body. More than half of the lush green leaves and branches had withered in the raging karmic fire, and even the branches had been charred and broken, drooping to the ground. But even if the drooping branches looked lifeless, there was no life in them. When the withered leaves and short branches fell to the ground, the other ordinary Faes on the ground grew frantically around the withered branches. When her tree core had been dug out, the woman in the palace dress knew that she couldn't survive this heaven and earth cleansing. Tonight's update at least 20 chapters. Let's do a preview. Hehe. I hope everyone will support button and ask for book coins. Book subscriptions, tips, recommendation tickets, monthly tickets, book reviews results are very important for future book recommendations. End of this chapter. Chapter 307. Any Fae, even if it was in its prime state, would not be able to survive. None of them dared to say that they would definitely be able to survive the world cleansing. What's more, at this moment, the woman in the robe was still injured from having her tree core dug out. Lin Yuan looked at the plants on the ground that were still growing wildly even on the snow, and his heart suddenly stirred. As the saying goes, fallen flowers are not heartless, they turn into spring mud to protect the flowers. In fact, these suzerain/myth breed Faes were born from nature and seized the essence of heaven and earth. He was comprehending a lore rune that held a trace of the laws of heaven and earth. Lin Yuan looked at the mother of Bloodbath's sorrowful expression and hesitated for a moment before taking out the life-form sacrificial fire from the spirit lock spatial zone. The moment the life form sacrificial fire's majestic life energy appeared, it immediately alerted the mother of bloodbath. It also gave birth to a new lease of life amidst the despair on the woman's calm face. If it could be said that in the previous moment, the woman in the pink-purple palace dress was a strong person who was forcing herself to be happy and sad before parting. At this moment he finally saw hope in a hopeless situation. This was because the youth in front of him was holding a ray of hope in his hand. A heaven and earth oddity's life form sacrificial fire was a plant species phase second life. Moreover, the tree core of this pink-purple palace-dressed woman, who was at the peak of suzerain stage / myth 2 and was about to break through to myth 3, did not shatter. The tree core and the life form sacrificial fire were enough for the woman in the pink-purple palace dress to survive the myth 3 world baptism. Lin Yuan said as he threw the life form sacrificial fire over. Senior, with this life form sacrificial fire, you should be able to pass the world baptism of myth 3. The woman in the pinkish-purple dress looked at the glowing life form sacrificial fire in her hand. His eyes, which seemed to be filled with love and kindness towards all living things, were now filled with gratitude. The mother of bloodbath's choked voice was also filled with surprise. However, there was also a hint of indescribable warmth in this pleasant surprise. The mother of bloodbath turned to the woman in the pink-purple palace dress. Big Sister Xia, this is the Moon Empress disciple. I am now his Dao protector. His name is Lin Yuan. The woman looked at the life form sacrificial fire in her hand and then at Lin Yuan solemnly. She bowed solemnly to express her gratitude. Then the woman in the pinkish-purple palace dress leaped up and entered her plant body, which had withered and turned yellow from the baptism of the world. The branches of the withered plant danced and directly fused the tree core and the life form sacrificial fire into the hole in the tree trunk. In an instant, a vitality that seemed to be able to pierce through heaven and earth was awakened from within the plant. The withered branches detached from the tree trunk and new buds grew out in an instant. The new leaves on the tree were like the flourishing midsummer that would remain verdant no matter how many reincarnations it went through. With this huge upgrade, the suzerain fantasy plantation tree was full of pinkish-purple flowers that looked like hydrangeas. The embroidered ball-shaped flowers continuously fell, and then sprayed into a beautiful and chaotic red, sprinkling into the sky, to welcome the brownish-red flames of the baptism of heaven and earth. This world baptism lasted for 4 hours. Although the mother of bloodbath had helped at the last moment, it was considered a daunting experience without any mishaps. After the world baptism, the mother of bloodbath had helped out at the last moment. After the world baptism, the world grace was about to arrive. The woman in the pinkish-purple palace dress gracefully walked under the hole in the sky. A lustrous white halo sprinkled down from the hole and landed on the woman in the pinkish-purple palace dress. At that moment, the plant that was originally full of embroidered ball-shaped flowers instantly grew wildly. It grew from a height of 30 meters to a height of nearly 70 meters. At that moment, under the world grace, the woman in the pinkish-purple palace dress activated the Law rune. The pinkish-purple petal-shaped Law rune landed on the huge plant body, and the huge plant rippled with clear and crystalline green waves. The crystalline green waves mixed with the pinkish-purple halo seemed to be cleansing the will of heaven and earth. In the end, the nearly 70-meter-tall plant body kept shrinking and finally turned into a small garland. This small garland was full of embroidered ball-shaped flowers. If one didn't look closely, it looked like a green branch supported by jade, with many pinkish-purple bells hanging on it. The woman in the pinkish-purple palace dress held it in her hand and looked at it for a moment before putting it on her wrist. This was a transformation that a suzerain/myth breed fae would definitely experience after reaching myth 3. This transformation was called body weaponization. Body weaponization literally meant that the fae's body would turn into a weapon. This way, a suzerain/myth breed fae in human form would have strength that wasn't inferior to its beast form. When the suzerain/myth 3 fae turned into a weapon and combined with its human form, it would release a stronger power. This kind of power was known as spirit return. It was precisely because of spirit return that a suzerain/myth breed fae's myth 3 was a huge dividing line. When a suzerain/myth 3 fae reached the state of spirit return, it could easily beat up a suzerain/myth 2 fae. This was because there was a huge difference between a suzerain/myth breed fae that could enter the state of spirit return and a suzerain/myth breed fae that couldn't. They weren't on the same level. Therefore, a suzerain/myth breed fae that could enter the state of spirit return was also called a great overlord. At that moment, the world cleansing was considered to have ended. The woman in the pinkish-purple palace dress was considered to have officially reached Myth 3. The woman in the pinkish-purple palace dress looked at Lin Yuan and then looked up at her pinkish-purple petal-shaped law rune. I, Endless Summer, swear by the Enlightenment law rune to become the guardian of this human who gave me a new life. I will protect him all the way and obey his orders. If I violate this oath, midsummer shall wither. With the pinkish-purple petal-shaped law rune as the main body, it seemed to be bearing the witness of heaven and earth. A pinkish-purple halo shot out from the petal-shaped law rune and landed on Lin Yuan's body. It made Lin Yuan feel as though he was looking at this world more clearly than before. Lin Yuan looked at the hole where the world cleansing had just descended and the world grace had descended. He then looked at the wildly growing plants around him, which returned to calmness after growing wildly. The soil under his feet that had lost nutrients became fertile again. All of this seemed to contain endless knowledge and wisdom. Lin Yuan seemed to have a faint feeling of enlightenment again. However, this faint feeling of enlightenment was so faint that it could be ignored. Lin Yuan scratched his head. He didn't expect that because he had taken out the life form's sacrificial fire. He had actually obtained the allegiance of a suzerain/myth 3 plant fae. Explosive updates. Start. A total of 20 updates. First update. End of this chapter. Chapter 308. A guardian and a path protector were completely different. A path protector was equivalent to a role between a guardian and a teacher, but a guardian was equivalent to the loyalty of a knight. If a retainer knight was a spirit chi professional's loyalty to a creation master, then a guardian was the loyalty of a human with a willpower rune or a fae with a law rune to a spirit chi professional. There was a slight difference in nature between a path protector and a guardian. However, the way they established their relationship with a spirit chi professional was similar. They were both sworn with a law rune and they were equally strong and reliable. The mother of Bloodbath watched as Endless Summer made an oath in this world, but it did not find it strange. This was because of the kindness of helping through the world cleansing and saving lives. It was enough for a fae to repay with its life. Lin Yuan had previously decided to build his own guild club. However, he had only thought about it and had not taken action. Firstly, it was because the floating island whale had not become a fantasy breed and become a huge floating island that could support a faction. Another reason was that Lin Yuan did not have any experts that he could use. If Lin Yuan wanted to build his own faction, the most basic thing was to be able to take out items like the flower brocade pearls and completely jade-textured wood that could cause a frenzy of competition. He also needed to have a strong enough force to deter a faction. Although the Moon Empress was Lin Yuan's master, he could not rely on her to build his own faction. Otherwise, if he used the Moon Empress faction to grow, in the eyes of other factions, Lin Yuan's faction would be equivalent to the Radiant Moon Palace's vassal. As Lin Yuan's path protector, the Mother of Bloodbath might be able to become a top expert that could support the establishment of a faction. However, the Mother of Bloodbath was Lin Yuan's path protector and not a member of his faction. Therefore, Lin Yuan had not built his faction yet. However, he no longer needed to worry about this problem that had previously troubled him. With the suzerain/myth 3 Endless Summer's loyalty, Lin Yuan's faction was enough to be called a tyrant in terms of force. Endless Summer, dressed in a pink-purple palace dress, walked to Lin Yuan's side and bowed. That loving and gentle voice rang in Lin Yuan's ears. Lin Yuan, I will be your protector in the future. I am willing to help you remove the dust from your clothes. Lin Yuan was a little confused. Endless Summer was now a suzerain/myth 3 fae and could be considered a contemporary expert. However, Lin Yuan did not know how to address Endless Summer for its sudden allegiance. The Mother of Bloodbath said to Lin Yuan in a serious tone. 4 spiritual creatures undergoing the world's baptism is a struggle against the heavens. You saved her and she pledged her loyalty to you. Don't feel like it's something you can't bear. If you really want to say it, it's her who owes you because there's nothing more important than surviving in this world. After listening to the Mother of Bloodbath's words, Lin Yuan seemed to suddenly understand the rules of handling fays. Indeed, to a fae that was about to die, saving a life was enough for a fae to have more possibilities in the future. Endless Summer had already turned around to pick up the dead Night Calamity Crow and handed it to Lin Yuan. This suzerain/myth 2 Night Calamity Crow's carcass is quite valuable. After speaking, Endless Summer's eyes were fixed on Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan looked at Endless Summer's eyes and suddenly saw a trace of waiting for recognition. Lin Yuan revealed a sunny smile and took the Night Calamity Crow's carcass from Endless Summer. Endless Summer, I will have to trouble you in the future. Endless Summer also revealed a gentle smile. The emotion of waiting for recognition had disappeared, and there was only a kind of following and anticipation. The smile on the Mother of Bloodbath's face didn't stop when Lin Yuan took out the life-form sacrificial fire. The Mother of Bloodbath didn't know why, but it felt that this sunny youth in front of it had a kind of magic. As a fae, the Mother of Bloodbath didn't think that it would believe and recognize a human who was many times weaker than it. The Mother of Bloodbath had to admit that before Lin Yuan helped it break through to Myth 2, the Mother of Bloodbath had subconsciously recognized Lin Yuan. The Mother of Bloodbath had watched this sunny youth grow step by step over the past few months. The Mother of Bloodbath couldn't help but think of the world cleansing that Lin Yuan had experienced at Myth 2. The youth who stood unmoving in the wind and rain and held up a path for its survival. The Mother of Bloodbath felt that Lin Yuan was a little silly. He clearly could have been selfish, but he didn't choose to be selfish, just like when Lin Yuan took out the life-form sacrificial fire. It was because of this that the Mother of Bloodbath gradually saw Lin Yuan differently from the Moon Empress. The Moon Empress was completely the Mother of Bloodbath's benefactor. To Lin Yuan, the Mother of Bloodbath felt that its relationship with Lin Yuan was more like its relationship with Endless Summer. Like a senior, like a friend, like a relative. The Mother of Bloodbath said to Lin Yuan, "Give me the bottle containing the drop of essence blood that I gave you previously." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan handed the bottle containing the Night Calamity Crow's essence blood that he had placed in the amber button-shaped diamond phase storage box to the Mother of Bloodbath. The Mother of Bloodbath took the bottle, opened the cork, poured the black essence blood from its palm into the bottle, and then plugged the cork again. Then the Mother of Bloodbath threw the bottle to Lin Yuan and said, "I used the Blood Law Rune to purify the Night Calamity Crow's blood. I just used the Blood Law Rune to purify the Night Calamity Crow's blood. There are exactly 20 drops of essence blood in this bottle, including the one from before." After handing the bottle to Lin Yuan, the Mother of Bloodbath sighed. "Although this Night Calamity Crow didn't have the chance to use the Law Rune just now, I think its Law Rune should be inclined towards the Dark Attribute Power Attack type. It's an extremely good Law Rune for sneak attacks." When the Mother of Bloodbath said this, it looked at Endless Summer. The Mother of Bloodbath was very clear about Endless Summer's strength. Endless Summer might not be a suzerain/myth breed fae that was good at defense. However, the Night Calamity Crow could take out the tree core in a sneak attack, especially when Endless Summer's grade was slightly higher than the Night Calamity Crow. This Night Calamity Crow had been stuck at suzerain/myth 2 for a long time. However, Endless Summer had touched the threshold of myth 3 and was ready to face the myth 3 world cleansing. After saying that, the Mother of Bloodbath reached out and pinched the Night Calamity Crow's head in Lin Yuan's hand. Chapter 309. Lin Yuan immediately heard the sound of fine iron shattering. Immediately after, he saw the Mother of Bloodbath take out a black crystal about the size of a fingernail from the pinnacle suzerain/myth 2 Night Calamity Crow's head. This black crystal seemed to have a layer of unclear night fog flowing on it, and the inside of the fog seemed to be constantly eroding something. This kind of erosion seemed to be able to turn anything under the night fog into flying ashes. Endless Summer looked at this fingernail-sized black crystal and said, "This is the Night Death Law Rune. It's Night Death's Law Rune. It contains a kind of death energy. This law crystal is still in perfect condition without any damage." Lin Yuan's eyes immediately widened when he heard the words law crystal. He carefully looked at the fingernail-sized black crystal in the Mother of Bloodbath's hand. Lin Yuan had heard the Moon Empress mention the law crystal before, but he had not asked about it in detail since it was something that only appeared on myth breed phase. He did not expect to have a chance to see it now. The Mother of Bloodbath looked at Lin Yuan's probing eyes and handed the thumb-sized crystal-like death crystal to him. "Keep it well. This is the truly precious thing. The mother of Bloodbath cleared its throat and explained. After a myth-breed Fae dies, the law rune they comprehend will not disappear but turn into a crystal-like law crystal. However, it is rare for a law crystal to be so complete because suzerain/myth-breed Faes can activate their law runes in battle. When the law rune's energy is consumed or collides with other law runes during the battle, cracks will appear. After a Fae reaches Myth 2, it will comprehend a method of burning willpower runes. Therefore most law crystals are fragmented and very few are complete. Lin Yuan could not help but ask, "What about this law crystal?" When he asked this question, Lin Yuan had a faint guess in his heart. The mother of Bloodbath took the Night Calamity Crow's corpse from Lin Yuan's hand and started to dismantle it. That's because that stinky crow died before it could activate its law rune. Big Sister Xia's Enlightenment law rune can stabilize the mind. In addition to Big Sister Xia's all-out attack and my sneak attack at the beginning and the last wave of harvest, I ended the Night Calamity Crow's life. That's why this law crystal is complete. The law crystals of Myth 3 phase are also different after they die. Look at this willpower crystal in your hand that contains the dark-type death attribute. Don't you see 2 golden marks on it? The number of each golden mark represents the realm of the myth-breed Fae. As the mother of Bloodbath explained, its mind seemed to suddenly think of the Moon Empress looking at it with a smile. At that moment, the mother of Bloodbath felt a chill all over its body. If the Moon Empress knew that I dared to teach Lin Yuan knowledge, I'm afraid she will definitely mark me down in her heart. Lin Yuan was listening attentively, but the mother of Bloodbath said quietly, "Don't worry. The next time you have a question and answer session with the Moon Empress, don't ever say that I told you about this. You must use the Moon Empress knowledge as the standard. Here I've dismantled all the spiritual materials of this pinnacle suzerain/myth 2 Night Calamity Crow for you. However, even if all these materials were added together, they still wouldn't be a match for the complete Darkness Death Law crystal with 2 notches." Lin Yuan took the spiritual materials that the mother of Bloodbath handed over. Lin Yuan suddenly felt that the mother of Bloodbath was simply a professional at dismantling birds. This suzerain/myth 2 Night Calamity Crow had been dismantled by the mother of Bloodbath. However, whether it was the materials obtained from the Night Calamity Crow or the Death Law crystal, they were things that Lin Yuan could not use at the moment. Putting aside how rare it was to obtain things from a pinnacle suzerain/myth 2 Fae. For example, the law crystal with 2 golden marks could only be obtained by instantly killing a suzerain/myth 2 Fae. How many people in the world could have such strength? This pinnacle suzerain/myth 2 Night Calamity Crow was really Lin Yuan's treasure. Whether it was the phoenix perching Chinese parasol tree or the golden metal disc containing it, they were not things that Lin Yuan could easily obtain. In the end, this Night Calamity Crow had even dutifully delivered its complete body as a treasure. Lin Yuan was now simply rich. Endless Summer looked at the environment in the depths of the endless forest and said with some emotion, "Ever since I had consciousness, I have never left this place. Ever since I gained consciousness, I've never left this place. However, in the future I'll be able to go anywhere." Endless Summer said this with some reluctance, but it was more of a longing. For animal species phase and insect species phase, as long as they did not die at normal, they could travel tens of thousands of miles and see the scenery along the way. But for Endless Summer, when it reached Myth 3, it could just leave the land under its feet. Lin Yuan saw that there were no more problems with Endless Summer's body, and its Myth 3 realm had completely stabilized. Lin Yuan immediately said the purpose of his trip. Endless Summer, the mother of Bloodbath, said that you have the resources to upgrade Red Thorn from epic to legend. I wonder if you can upgrade Red Thorn's quality? While speaking, Lin Yuan had already summoned Red Thorn. Red Thorn's smooth vine, which was tied with a red ribbon and had no thorns, was placed on Lin Yuan's wrist the moment Red Thorn was summoned. Lin Yuan could feel Red Thorn's emotional fluctuations. Apart from dependence, there was also an emotion called peace of mind. Lin Yuan did not know why, but he suddenly felt that during this period of time, be it Genius, Chimey, Red Thorn, or Morbius, he had always been focused on busying himself. He had always been busy with his own things and neglected his companions. To him he had family, friends, and many fays. But to each of his contracted fays they only had him. This was because he, as their contractor, was their everything. At that moment, Morbius' voice suddenly echoed in Lin Yuan's mind. Lin Yuan, to each of us phase, having you around is the greatest happiness. You don't have to think too much about us and focus on the path you want to take. We still have a long time with you, a lifetime. Upon hearing Morbius' words, the words a lifetime kept flashing in Lin Yuan's mind. Lin Yuan said softly in his spiritual spatial zone, a lifetime is the longest time in life. A lifetime is the longest time in a person's life. It's great to have you guys around for a lifetime. A person's attitude toward phase was actually very easy to see from their interaction with their contracted phase. Chapter 3:10. Endless Summer could clearly feel that Red Thorn's intelligence was like a child that had just learned to express joy, anger, sorrow and joy. Lin Yuan must have always treated Red Thorn very well. Otherwise, even if he was Red Thorn's contractor, Red Thorn would never be so dependent on him. Given Red Thorn's intelligence, if Lin Yuan did not treat Red Thorn well, it would have a kind of fear toward Lin Yuan. Endless Summer hated the feeling of phase being afraid and obedient to humans the most. He looked at Red Thorn's vine that was tightly holding onto Lin Yuan's hand and the red ribbon that was tied around it. Endless Summer suddenly felt that even time had warmed up. In the depths of the endless forest, it had been snowing heavily recently. The white snow pressed on the ground, giving off a chill. However, the scene before her eyes made her feel as warm as the midsummer in August. My enlightenment law rune condenses power every 5 years to enlighten a plant-type fae. I used to enlighten myself every 5 years, but I reserved a chance to enlighten myself. I thought that if I couldn't resist the world cleansing when advancing to Myth 3, I could use this enlightenment opportunity to earn a trace of life for myself, but I didn't use it. However, I'm not sure if this law rune's enlightenment can let your contracted Red Thorn evolve from epic to legend. After speaking, Endless Summer summoned her pink-purple petal-shaped enlightenment willpower rune. It immediately used enlightenment on Red Thorn. This enlightenment was cast very quickly, and Lin Yuan could feel that Red Thorn immediately fell into a deep sleep after receiving this enlightenment. Lin Yuan knew that Red Thorn's deep sleep was a necessary state for Red Thorn to improve its strength. This was because Red Thorn was originally just a source-type source seed. Red Thorn's current state was the result of Red Thorn's evolution after Lin Yuan had chosen its direction. It could be said that Red Thorn was originally a blank space, but this blank space had been drawn into its current state under Lin Yuan and Red Thorn's joint efforts. Lin Yuan didn't dare to say that Red Thorn's current evolution and form was the best route. However, Red Thorn's current state was the most suitable for Lin Yuan's combat style. Endless Summer sensed Red Thorn's state and said, "One enlightenment takes 7 days. It takes 7 days for each enlightenment. It looks like there's a high chance that it'll advance in grade." Lin Yuan nodded. In fact, just a second before Endless Summer spoke, Endless Summer had already spoken. Lin Yuan already knew that Red Thorn's quality would definitely increase. This was because Red Thorn had just sent him a request, asking him which direction he should evolve towards. Lin Yuan did not expect Endless Summer's enlightenment to be so powerful. Endless Summer's enlightenment was equivalent to letting Red Thorn become a bronze/epic monster. With one step he crossed this insurmountable hurdle and reached bronze/legend. However, he also knew that Endless Summer's law rune's enlightenment was so strong because it had just reached Myth 3. Moreover, Endless Summer could only use the enlightenment law rune once every 5 years. Since Endless Summer had just undergone the world cleansing, Endless Summer's enlightenment law rune still had a trace of world grace. After breaking through the barrier of Red Thorn's quality, this enlightenment brought with it a hint of the grace of heaven and earth. Moreover, Red Thorn had nowhere to vent the huge amount of energy it had accumulated from devouring a large amount of flesh and blood in the Demon Sea. It had originally planned to upgrade its grade. This huge amount of energy was matched with the hint of the grace of heaven and earth in the enlightenment. It was very likely that Red Thorn would break through to silver when it fused with the willpower rune and became a fantasy breed. Lin Yuan had always been very clear about Red Thorn's evolutionary path. However, on the main path that Lin Yuan had planned, the detailed branches that Red Thorn had given him made him hesitate. Because of one of Lin Yuan's own decisions, Red Thorn's form would be very different after becoming a fantasy breed. However, Lin Yuan could slowly think about it and did not need to be very anxious to decide on Red Thorn's evolutionary path. This was because Red Thorn's metamorphosis would be completed when it fused with the law rune and became a fantasy breed. Therefore, during the 7 days of enlightenment, Lin Yuan could make a careful consideration. He could make a thoughtful balance according to his combat power system. In the Radiance Federation's Supreme Imperial Court, 13 chairs were located next to a huge stone table engraved with many marks. Each of the 13 chairs had a silhouette on it. Each of them was a true expert of this era. Each of them was a hand that held up the Radiance Federation's sky. At that moment, the Imperial Court was very quiet. A benevolent-looking old man was sitting on the main seat of the stone table. However, the old man was leaning against the backrest, and the light in the room was slanted down so the old man's face could not be seen. However, he could feel the respect that the other 12 people sitting on the chairs beside the stone table had for the old man. The Moon Empress was sitting on the second chair on the left side of the Imperial Court. A burly man with a full beard sat on the upper side of the Moon Empress. The burly man was squinting at the Moon Empress. The Moon Empress was looking at the man holding a green bamboo in the third seat with an inexplicable look in her eyes. The one who had been looking at the Moon Empress was the oldest of the 3 Class 5 Creation Masters, Chef Supreme. The Moon Empress was looking at the Bamboo Monarch. It was obvious that the 3 of them were discussing something. Sitting opposite the Moon Empress was the chief guard of the Spirit Guards, whose face was always covered with a layer of black veil. Sitting opposite the Moon Empress was a smiling man with peach blossom eyes. There was also a cold-looking man in dark armor with an ashen face. If Lin Yuan saw these 2 people, he would definitely realize that one of them was the man called Iron Prison, who had almost forced his master to make a move. One of them was the smiling man who had rushed over at the last moment and mentioned what happened 10 years ago, causing the Moon Empress to stop. Apart from Chef Supreme, the Moon Empress, the Bamboo Monarch, Chief Guard Yi, Iron Prison, and the Smiling Man, there were also 6 men of different appearances among them. Among the 12 seats in the 2 rows, there were only 2 women. One was the Moon Empress and the other was the Chief Guard of the Spirit Guards. But now the atmosphere was a little strange. Everyone was communicating with their eyes. Only the Smiling Man was tapping the table with his fingers, as if he was waiting for something. A very gentle voice rang out. It was hard to tell the age of this gentle voice, but it was also very peaceful, and there was an indescribable weight in the peacefulness. This voice came from the old man who was leaning against the chair on the main seat. What do you think about this issue? Chapter 311. Iron Prison slammed the table and stood up. This matter must be resolute to the end. After Iron Prison finished speaking, no one responded. The Smiling Man stopped tapping on the table and pulled Iron Prison, who was sitting beside him, to sit down. This action was done very skillfully, as if it had been done many times. Chief Guard Yi stood up and waved her hand. Nearly 100 source-type items landed on the stone table. Contrasting with the radiant patterns on the stone table, these source-type items appeared exceptionally dazzling. There are a total of 109 source-type items in the Radiance Federation. 33 of them come from controlled class 3-dimensional rifts, 57 from controlled class 2-dimensional rifts, and the remaining 29 from class 1-dimensional rifts. Speaking of this, the black-veiled bureau chief Yi paused and continued. However, these class 1-dimensional rifts are all alien insect-dimensional rifts, and they are all located in the remote counties around the big cities. Although the chief guard of the Night Spirit Guard's voice was calm, there was an indescribable seriousness in it. Bureau Chief Ye's words meant that everyone present already knew the whole story. However, they did not expect so many dimensional rifts to be set up. Furthermore, this juncture happened to coincide with the active period of the decennial dimensional rift. When the old man on the main seat heard Bureau Chief Ye's words, he turned to look at the Moon Empress. The calm voice sounded again. Moon Empress, what do you think? The Moon Empress didn't stand up, but her back was perfectly straight. All the rules will change with time, but what will never change is who has the biggest fist, who has the right to speak. You've already been schemed against, what else can you say? I've already ordered the Totem Moon to go to the Darkstone continent where Gloomy Dark is. This matter shouldn't be behind Gloomy Dark, but Gloomy Dark must be involved with this organization. Then, let the Totem Moon hang high in the sky for 3 days as the price. Since someone tampered with the county beside Radiant City, the power of the 3 suns and moonlight should be comparable to these tampered dimensional rifts. As soon as the Moon Empress finished speaking, The chief guard of the spirit guard sighed and said, "That's right. Qiyu, you haven't changed at all from 10 years ago." The Moon Empress lowered her head and looked at her hands. After a while she spoke. "It has changed. My heart is warm now." The Imperial Court Conference started from the setting of the sun in the west, and slowly went on until the sky was filled with stars. The person sitting in the middle said in a calm voice, "Today's topic is over. Does anyone have a new topic?" The Moon Empress looked at Bamboo Monarch and Chef Supreme and stood up. The Radiance 100 Sequence's previous assessment was only the finals. It was too monotonous and couldn't assess the overall strength. Therefore, I suggest that the Radiance 100 Sequence's assessment this year should be changed. The Moon Empress words stunned an ordinary-looking middle-aged man on the 12th seat. This middle-aged man was the one Lin Yuan had encountered when he had applied to participate in the Radiance 100 Sequence competition with his exclusive title. The middle-aged man looked at the Moon Empress and couldn't help but twitch his lips. When did the Moon Empress start to care about the Radiance Sacred Hall? However, it was true that the Radiance 100 Sequence's selection method had not changed for more than a decade. It was indeed time to change it. However, the Moon Empress didn't expect the topic to change. 2 years later, 4 Radiance Envoy positions will be vacant. I suggest that Creation Masters are also qualified to fight for a Radiance Envoy spot. The Moon Empress words caused the atmosphere of the meeting that was about to end to turn serious. At that moment, the Bamboo Monarch and Chef Supreme exchanged a look and looked deeply at the Moon Empress. Bamboo Monarch stood up and said, "Chef Supreme and I agree with the Moon Empress point of view. The Radiance Envoys are a team of 5. The strength of each member is important, but having a Creation Master in the team will only be beneficial to the Radiance Envoys." Chef Supreme felt a little uncomfortable in his heart as he recalled the Moon Empress words. Chef Supreme knew that everything the Moon Empress did was to pave the way for her disciple. However, when he thought about the disciples he had taken in, especially the eldest disciple who had just returned home with injuries all over his body and was acting like a scoundrel, his eldest disciple even wanted him to accept another person as a disciple. This was simply trying to kill his own master. How could there be such a sinful disciple? Even if I don't know, I can't let my old bones snatch the Moon Empress disciple. If that was the case, his kitchen fragrance palace would probably be demolished by the Moon Empress. That night the royal court meeting did not end. When the sun gave birth to dawn and once again descended upon the world with its radiance, the Moon Empress stepped out of the imperial court and looked at the rising sun. Suddenly, a smile appeared on her cold face. At this moment, the smiling man with peach blossom eyes and Iron Prison were standing next to the old man leaning against the chair on the main seat. Iron Prison said after a moment of silence, "I agree with the Moon Queen." The smiling man with peach blossom eyes was a little surprised. Wasn't Iron Prison the best at going against everyone? When did he change? The smiling man with peach blossom eyes saw that the person on the main seat had not spoken. Knowing that he was waiting for him to express his opinion, the smiling man with peach blossom eyes pondered for a moment and said, "Above the mythical level is the Genesis level. I'm afraid only the younger generation will have the chance to see it." The old man sitting on the main seat suddenly let out a peaceful laugh after hearing this. In the world of creation there was a carrot that was eaten every day. In the depths of the endless forest in the north, the pure white snow had been stopping for the past few days. It had completely decorated the depths of the endless forest into a white world. However, the plant-type phase in the depths of the endless forest were generally of higher grade, and most of them were species that were verdant all year round. Therefore, the depths of the endless forest that was covered with pure white snow was somewhat like a green world that was blooming in the snow. In a giant tree hole, a white-clothed youth was resting with his eyes closed. All of a sudden, the white-clothed youth's eyelashes trembled and he opened his eyes. While Red Thorn had been evolving for the past few days, Lin Yuan had been considering the few evolutionary directions that Red Thorn had sent to him based on the spiritual requests. Red Thorn had sent a total of 3 evolutionary directions. The first was to strengthen Red Thorn's Ortet strength after becoming a fantasy breed and maintain the current child ramets and ramets produced by Red Thorn's spore cavity. Red Thorn's application route was immediately rejected by Lin Yuan. Because Lin Yuan had chosen to let Red Thorn evolve toward a group, he had no intention of changing Red Thorn's evolutionary direction in the future. Chapter 5, End of this chapter. Chapter 3:12. If he rashly changed Red Thorn's evolution direction to evolve its Ortet, then the evolution potential in Red Thorn's evolution process would be wasted. Lin Yuan naturally would not do such a thing that consumed his contracted phase evolution potential. The second evolution direction that Red Thorn applied for was to maintain the coevolution mode of the Ortet and child Ramets. While strengthening the Ortet's attack ability, it would also strengthen the combat ability of the plants that spawn the Sea of Flowers. This evolution route was also the one that Lin Yuan had been letting Red Thorn choose so far. It was an evolution method that not only maintained a part of Red Thorn's Ortet's combat ability, but also strengthened the Sea of Flowers that spawned it. However, when Lin Yuan saw Red Thorn's third evolution request, he hesitated. This third evolution request was what Lin Yuan had been thinking about for the past few days. Red Thorn's third evolution request could be said to be giving up the Ortet's combat ability. Instead, it would give all the combat ability to the spawn child Ramets and child Ramets, greatly enhancing the spawn child Ramets and child Ramets' strength and the speed of the Sea of Flowers spread. If Red Thorn chose the third evolution direction when it became a fantasy breed, it would weaken the Ortet's combat ability. Thus, the Ortet would turn from a unit with combat ability into a pure production unit. This evolution mode could be said to be the same as the first one, which was an extreme evolution. It was just that it had changed from the extreme individual to the extreme group. However, this third evolution route also coincided with the direction that Lin Yuan had been letting Red Thorn evolve. In terms of individual strength, the acid corrosion queen bee parasitized in Red Thorn's body could completely bear the responsibility of individual damage. In fact, Red Thorn's Ortet did not need to have an extremely strong defense. Lin Yuan's source sand could protect Red Thorn's Ortet, and the acid corrosion queen bee could also take on the responsibility of protecting Red Thorn's Ortet. More importantly, based on Red Thorn's performance in these recent battles, the Ortet's single combat ability was almost useless. Whether it was on Star Web or in the battle against dimensional rifts in reality, Red Thorn's child Ramets and child Ramets were almost useless. Instead, it was the Sea of Flowers formed by Red Thorn's child Ramets and child Ramets that played a role. The second evolution route that Red Thorn requested might not seem wrong, and it was evolving toward all aspects. However, if it was too conventional, it would be mediocre. Lin Yuan didn't only have Red Thorn, so he didn't need it to take care of everything. Sometimes, a specific contracted phase outstanding performance in a specific aspect would often be better than an all-around development. It seemed like Lin Yuan's contracted Red Thorn and the Source Sand's activation method was rather similar. However, Red Thorn and the Source-type Source Sand had completely different positions in Lin Yuan's heart. The Source-type Source Sand was an elemental type, which meant that it could develop in any direction. Moreover, he focused on nurturing the Source Sand's defense. However, he also used the Source Sand's advantage of being able to control, output, and defend to make up for some gaps on the battlefield. Extremely powerful phase like Chimey and the Acid Corrosion Queen Bee were sharp swords. Phase like Red Thorn and the Blue Flash Purple Butterfly that could be used for control were entangling vines. Phase like the Jasmine Lily and the Spirit Gather Goldfish that could be used for healing were replenishing springs. In that case, the Source Sand was the core phase that connected the sharp sword, the coiling vines and the replenishing spring. Afterward, Lin Yuan would evolve Red Thorn toward the third evolutionary path that Red Thorn had requested. It would be the same as turning the entangling vines into a coiling snake. The thorns on the vines would become the venomous fangs on the snake's head. Not only would it increase Red Thorn's control ability, but it would also increase the possibility of killing. This would allow Lin Yuan's group control and output to climb to another level. More importantly, Red Thorn's group path was different from other phase. Other phase like Qin Hongfeng's huge-tailed swamp lizard, which Lin Yuan had encountered previously. The huge-tailed swamp lizard's elemental magical type group attack could certainly produce a wave of output immediately. However, this kind of elemental magical type group attack consumed a lot of spiritual power, and it could stop at will when the spiritual power supply was stopped. However, as long as Red Thorn's Ortet was not killed, and Red Thorn could rely on the Sea of Flowers to kill the target to obtain flesh energy, Red Thorn's Sea of Flowers would always have combat power. Moreover, Red Thorn's true strength did not lie in this fixed mode of duel on the Star Towers arena. Instead, when facing a large number of dimensional life forms in the dimensional rift, it could quickly spread out the sea of flowers while absorbing flesh energy. It would then play a decisive role in suppressing the dimensional life forms. Therefore, to a certain extent, with Red Thorn around, any group attack that was not strong in terms of individual strength would just be sending food to its death. Finally, Lin Yuan made up his mind to let Red Thorn choose the third evolution method. At this moment, Red Thorn had also awakened from its 7 days of enlightenment. Lin Yuan looked at Red Thorn and found that it had indeed evolved from epic to legend. Red Thorn's ortet was much bigger than before and its vines were thicker. Lin Yuan suddenly realized that when he looked at Red Thorn he really felt that it was a bit like a single target fae. However, after Red Thorn became a fantasy breed, it would welcome its biggest metamorphosis since it had been hatched. Endless Summer and the Mother of Bloodbath had been guarding outside and saw that Red Thorn had evolved from epic to legend. Endless Summer originally wanted to congratulate it, but it realized that the Mother of Bloodbath had pulled it back and shook its head at it. Big Sister Summer, let's go somewhere further and guard. In a while, that plant in the tree hole that evolved from a source seed will evolve into a fantasy breed. Upon hearing the Mother of Bloodbath's words, Endless Summer could not help but recall how difficult it had been to rely on itself to comprehend the willpower rune. However, be it the Mother of Bloodbath or Endless Summer, they were very firm about the path they had taken. If they were not firm, they would not have been able to become such experts. Alright, we are about to leave this place. I will also look around. Endless Summer also understood the Mother of Bloodbath's meaning. 4 spirit chi professionals, using the willpower rune to fuse with their contracted phase to evolve into fantasy breeds was a very private matter. There shouldn't be anyone around to disturb them. Even if Lin Yuan did not say it, the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer understood this point. Chapter 6, End of this chapter. Chapter 313. Lin Yuan took a deep breath as he looked at Red Thorn, which had been promoted to legend and was only 1 step away from fantasy. Lin Yuan had contracted so many phases, and if he had to say who he was the most worried about, it would definitely be Red Thorn. However, worrying was just worrying. With regards to Red Thorn's evolution method that relied on devouring flesh and energy, even a true creation master wouldn't be able to do anything. Moreover, Lin Yuan had always wanted Red Thorn to evolve into a fantasy breed at bronze. It could even be said that as long as Red Thorn did not evolve into a fantasy breed, he would keep Red Thorn stuck at bronze. However, now that Red Thorn had advanced to legendary, it was equivalent to Red Thorn crossing the most difficult hurdle. When Lin Yuan felt Red Thorn's intimacy, he smiled silently and revealed his white teeth. Lin Yuan reached out to hold onto Red Thorn's vine and said, "Don't worry. Red Thorn, I didn't expect you to become a fantasy breed before genius." In Lin Yuan's mind, he had been pushing back the time for Red Thorn to become a fantasy breed. Lin Yuan even felt that Morbius would evolve into a fantasy breed before Red Thorn. Although Red Thorn couldn't understand Lin Yuan's words, it could sense the meaning behind them. Red Thorn waved its vines and seemed to be very happy. Lin Yuan summoned the willpower rune that he had decided to use before. It was the willpower rune that had brought new life from destruction. This willpower rune, which contained a new life amidst the destruction, had a layer of green. There was an indescribable will in this green color, as if the end of everything would be for a better beginning. He held his breath and shot the willpower rune which had been born from destruction at Red Thorn. Red Thorn also took the initiative to open its mouth of relinquish and welcomed the willpower rune. It directly swallowed the willpower rune that had been destroyed and had been reborn. At that moment, Lin Yuan gave Red Thorn the command he had chosen, which was to evolve in the third direction. However, Lin Yuan received another request from Red Thorn. Red Thorn's request this time was different from the previous one. If Red Thorn's previous request was to seek the path of evolution, in that case, Red Thorn's current request was for Lin Yuan to increase its ability or function. When Red Thorn had just hatched from the source seed, it had sent an evolution request and Lin Yuan had asked Red Thorn to weaken the roots. This allowed Red Thorn to not grow in the fixed soil under its feet during the battle. This allowed Red Thorn to rely on its vines to move during the battle, giving Red Thorn mobility. Afterward, according to Red Thorn's request, Lin Yuan had formulated a set of evolution path for Red Thorn by devouring flesh and energy, allowing it to become a predatory plant. This was also the reason why red thorn could grow the mouth of relinquish and store so much strong acid in the digestive cavity. This coincidentally laid the foundation for the acid corrosion queen bee to parasitize red thorn. And now red thorn had such a request. This also meant that when red thorn evolved, its body would be in the sea of demons. The massive amount of energy accumulated from devouring a large amount of flesh would directly push red thorn's rank to the silver rank. Only when red thorn broke through its rank would it be possible to increase this kind of functional evolution. Normal weakened roots. Elite devour flesh. Bronze rank accelerated digestion. After red thorn reached silver, Lin Yuan decided on the word energy storage. After Lin Yuan transmitted the command to red thorn began to evolve into a fantasy breed. However, red thorn's evolution method gave Lin Yuan a huge shock. This was because the vines growing on red thorn's body, the thick vines that grew close to its body to protect the mother ramets, or the sharp vines with barbs that extended out to cause damage to the target. They were all controlled by red thorn and sent into the mouth of relinquish. These vines all turned into the most original energy in the mouth of relinquish. However, this was just the beginning. Immediately after, red thorn's 12 rose-shaped digestive cavities that bloomed with demonic flowers were all sent into the mouth of relinquish. Even the spore cavity that red thorn used to spit out its spores shrank into the mouth of relinquish and was digested by the mouth of relinquish. It could be said that at this moment red thorn's appearance was only a terrifying digestive furnace, the mouth of relinquish with its sharp teeth turned outwards. At that moment, the mouth of relinquish suddenly lit up with a ball of green luster. This luster carried the same willpower as the willpower rune that gave birth to new life from destruction. At that moment, red thorn underwent another drastic change. First, the mouth of relinquish started to expand. In the past, the mouth of relinquish was only 1 meter tall and was like an ellipsoid. However, the mouth of relinquish had developed horizontally and turned into the shape of a pumpkin. The mouth of relinquish suddenly expanded and occupied most of the space in this tree hole. At that moment, the mouth of relinquish was 2 meters tall and nearly 3 meters wide. If red thorn's mouth of relinquish was said to be a small cherry mouth, and although it revealed sharp teeth, most of the dense teeth were still inside. Now red thorn's mouth of relinquish had changed from a small cherry mouth to a bloody mouth. The mouth of relinquish's folds opened up, and it split open into a huge mouth that could swallow a large ferocious beast. Moreover, Lin Yuan found that among the 18 huge mouths on red thorn's mouth of relinquish, each of them had a sharp vine-like tongue. The tongue was covered with sharp barbs. However, Lin Yuan could sense that red thorn's spiky tongue was not for grabbing flesh and stuffing it into its mouth. It was to help with digestion. Immediately after, energy flickered above the mouth of relinquish, and a flesh-like flower with a diameter of nearly 3 meters bloomed. This flesh-like flower was red thorn's newly grown spore cavity. Just from the size of this spore cavity, it could be seen how much red thorn's exclusive skill, spore reproduction, had been enhanced. Now, as long as the flesh-like flower above red thorn's mouth of relinquish scattered its spores, then the spores would instantly cover a large area. Immediately after, 12 pocket-like plant structures grew on the mouth of relinquish. These 12 huge pocket-like plant structures bloomed above these 12 huge pocket-like plant structures. However, according to Lin Yuan's inspection of red thorn's evolution, he found that these huge and beautiful flowers did not have any practical use. They were just to increase the degree of beauty. Previously, red thorn's digestive cavity was aggressive. However, red thorn had completely erased the aggression of the ortet's digestive cavity. Instead, it had increased the digestive cavity's ability to store acid. Those 12 huge pocket-like plant structures were filled with concentrated digestive fluid. Chapter 7, End of this chapter. Chapter 3:14. As long as the mouth of relinquish needed it, it would instantly flow back to assist in digestion. If red thorn's mouth of relinquish looked a little sinister and ugly before, then with these bag-like plant structures and the 12 delicate red flowers, it actually gave red thorn a strange sense of beauty. Malevolent and tender. At that moment, red thorn had officially become a fantasy breed. Now red thorn had reached bronze X/fantasy I. But then, the massive amount of flesh energy in the mouth of relinquish completely erupted at that moment. A violent roar came from the mouth of relinquish, and the energy wave formed by the mouth of relinquished digestion actually made Lin Yuan feel a repulsive force. Under the complete operation of fantasy breed Red Thorn's flesh furnace, the majestic flesh energy absorbed from the Sea of Devils was rapidly absorbed by Red Thorn. At that moment, Red Thorn was evolving from Bronze X/fantasy breed to Silver fantasy breed. At that moment, Lin Yuan realized that fist-sized round protrusions suddenly appeared on Red Thorn's mouth of relinquish. As Red Thorn consumed a large amount of flesh energy, these protrusions grew bigger and finally cracked open. Lin Yuan found that those protrusions turned out to be pairs of eyes. At a rough glance, nearly 60 fist-sized demonic black-red eyes opened on the mouth of relinquish, and each eye was filled with vigorous flesh energy. Lin Yuan sensed that each of Red Thorn's eyes on the mouth of relinquish contained half of the flesh energy that Red Thorn could currently store. These 60 eyes of relinquish were equivalent to increasing the flesh energy storage capacity in Red Thorn's body by nearly 30 times. Furthermore, it was the flesh energy that could be used at any time. Although this nearly 30 times storage capacity could not allow Red Thorn to instantly erupt, the energy would turn into damage and strike out. However, it would increase Red Thorn's ability to spread out the Sea of Flowers and expand the size of the Sea of Flowers. These eyes must be the new organization that Red Thorn had evolved with the ability to store energy. At the end of the evolution, a vine suddenly grew from the bottom of Red Thorn. This vine was very smooth. This time Red Thorn's vine had grown to nearly 10 meters long. After Red Thorn grew this vine, it was considered to have officially evolved into a silver fantasy breed. Lin Yuan checked Red Thorn's true data. Fey name, Red Thorn predator plant, Thousand Eyes sacrificial, spirit species, vine subfamily/giant flower Fey grade, silver 1/10. Fey type, source/wood Fey quality, fantasy eye skills frowny face mouth of relinquish, secretes an exuberant digestive fluid. The digestive fluid is extremely corrosive and can quickly digest the energy in food. Carnivorous vines. Vines filled with digestive juices and sharp teeth growing on the inside of the vines can feed on flesh and blood energy by scraping. Tongue of relinquish. Multiplies the speed of digestion and can secrete various acids from the flesh and blood it has consumed. Eye of relinquish. An eye formed through the consumption of flesh energy. Every eye contains a large amount of flesh energy. When the number of eyes of relinquish is maintained below 60, the eyes of relinquish can only store energy. When the number of eyes of relinquish exceeds 60, the eyes of relinquish will not be stored in the mouth of relinquish and can be turned into an energy ray at any time. Exclusive skill frowny face spore proliferation. The spore cavity spits out a large number of spores. The spores can absorb the energy provided by Red Thorn or flesh energy to rapidly proliferate and grow child ramets and ramets that are controlled by the mother ramets. Wither glory. Red Thorn can quickly absorb the energy in the land and inject it into the Sea of Flowers. As long as the roots of the child ramets and ramets are left in the land, the withered Sea of Flowers will reach the most prosperous state. Lin Yuan looked at the silver eye/fantasy eye Red Thorn and gulped. He was dumbfounded for a long time. Now that Red Thorn had evolved, it had recovered. Red Thorn's intelligence had reached the standard of a 7 or 8-year-old child. All of a sudden, the bright vine that grew out of Red Thorn spiraled and turned into a rattan chair that stood in front of Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan felt that after Red Thorn's intelligence had increased, it transmitted an even more attached emotion to him. Lin Yuan sat on the chair weaved by Red Thorn's vines. The chair formed by Red Thorn's vines was elastic and very comfortable. If Red Thorn spawned a Sea of Flowers to fight, sitting on this chair made of vines would be like sitting idly and watching the Sea of Flowers slaughter each other. As usual, Lin Yuan took out a red ribbon from the diamond face storage box and tied it on the vine that formed the chair. Red Thorn immediately made ya-ya sounds of happiness. However, Red Thorn no longer had vines dancing around. However, this wasn't a problem for Red Thorn and Lin Yuan to interact. Red Thorn's 12 red double-petaled flowers that were nearly 1 meter in size would sway and let out a whistle. It was like blowing a trumpet. Lin Yuan rubbed his forehead with his hand. Is Red Thorn going to develop its musical talent like Chimey? However, Lin Yuan had to admit that Red Thorn's beatbox was very strong. Lin Yuan sighed. Red Thorn was different from other Fays. Due to Red Thorn's attack mode, if he wanted to know Red Thorn's true strength, he would need to produce ramets to take a look. Lin Yuan then asked Red Thorn to produce ramets. As a result, Red Thorn produced 2 ramets, and they each had their own characteristics. One was made of dark green vines that were almost black. The vines had sharp teeth inside and were very powerful. This ramet had the strength and standard of a silver fae, which was equivalent to a class 2-dimensional life form. Lin Yuan sensed this ramet and realized that it was simply terrifying. This ramet was completely hollow inside. It had the digestive fluid from the ramet's rose-shaped digestive cavity. The rows of sharp teeth under the vines were like mouths that were feeding on their prey. Lin Yuan now understood that Red Thorn's evolution had increased the ramet's combat ability and simplified the digestive cavity. Through the hollow vines and the way the vines autonomously fed, the vine's ability to digest and obtain flesh energy was increased. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This ramet's form was obviously the form of Red Thorn's ability, carnivorous vines. Red Thorn's Ortet no longer had vines, so its ability, carnivorous vines, was reflected on the ramets in the sea of flowers. Previously, Red Thorn's ability wasn't called carnivorous vines but armored vines. However, it was obvious that the carnivorous vine's lethality was stronger now, and the characteristic of killing and digesting was very suitable for Red Thorn's combat aesthetics. The other ramet was a little strange. The other ramet was a flesh-shaped flower that was close to half a meter tall. This small flesh-shaped flower was a simplified spore cavity. Chapter 8, End of this chapter. Chapter 3:15. Lin Yuan didn't expect that Red Thorn's promotion to silver would actually resolve a drawback that couldn't be ignored. That was the problem of spreading the sea of flowers. Now, with the simplified spore cavity ramets, the simplified spore cavity ramets were equivalent to a base station. It could afford the replenishment of the sea of flowers spores within a certain range. Although Red Thorn's spores were very light and suitable for transmission, they couldn't be transmitted too far by itself. However, now that Red Thorn had the simple spore cavity to form the ramets, it could use the simple spore cavity ramets to spread the sea of flowers. As long as Red Thorn had enough flesh and blood energy, it could spread the sea of flowers without limit. The larger the sea of flowers, the easier it would be for Red Thorn to obtain enough flesh and blood energy, forming a virtuous cycle. This was simply a nightmare for low-grade dimensional life forms. All low-grade life forms would become Red Thorn's rations and contribute to its expansion of the sea of flowers. Lin Yuan felt that Red Thorn was completely worthy of the title of low-grade species adjudicator. At that moment, one of Red Thorn's eyes of relinquish suddenly disappeared, and it was transported to a simple spore cavity ramete through the vine channel connected to the ramete. When Red Thorn saw Lin Yuan paying attention to this scene, it tyrannically withdrew the eye of relinquish. Then he took back the eye of relinquish very domineeringly and babbled to prove to Lin Yuan that it was him. Lin Yuan didn't expect the eye of relinquish to be so flexible. It could be transported to all parts of the sea of flowers through the vine channel connected to the ramete. This would greatly enhance the sea of flowers' stubbornness. It would allow Red Thorn to be like a queen that could guide the battle in the sea of flowers at any time and carry out a reasonable allocation of resources. This wasn't the most important thing. In a large-scale battle, if there was endless flesh and blood energy for Red Thorn to feed on, then Red Thorn would be able to continuously transport the Eye of Relinquish. As for the Eyes of Relinquish that had appeared out of nowhere and contained half of Red Thorn's flesh and blood energy, it was impossible for Red Thorn to escape. It was like an assassin hiding in the sea of flowers, waiting to reap lives at any time. As for the Tongue of Relinquish, it proved that Red Thorn's digestive ability was a complete innovation. The digestive fluids of dimensional life forms that Red Thorn devoured contained all kinds of acidity. The existence of the Tongue of Relinquish allowed him to concoct the most suitable acid for the digestion of each dimensional creature. This would greatly increase Red Thorn's digestion efficiency. The effect of the Tongue of Relinquish wasn't just on Red Thorn's main body, but the entire sea of flowers. After checking the abilities, Lin Yuan wanted to check the exclusive skill that Red Thorn had obtained after becoming a fantasy breed, Wither Glory. Lin Yuan looked at the introduction of Withered Glory under True Data and understood its ability. This was equivalent to giving the entire sea of red thorny flowers a second chance at life. This allowed Red Thorn to extract the energy from the earth, allowing the Sea of Flowers to instantly reach a state of complete victory. However, when he thought of the state of the land after its energy was extracted, his brows twitched. Red Thorn immediately relied on these two ramets to execute its exclusive skill, Withered Glory. Lin Yuan was right. After a large amount of land energy was extracted, the land turned into a desertified state. This made Lin Yuan clap his hands and shout, "Good!" This was equivalent to Red Thorn relying on its exclusive skill, Withered Glory, to help the source sand create a large amount of yellow sand. In other words, Red Thorn and the source sand had formed a link. This wasn't as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. How terrifying would the Sea of Sand from the Sea of Flowers be? In order for the source-type source sand to display its strength, it had to be able to create sand. The more sand, the stronger the source sand. However, the problem of the source sand creating sand had been solved by Red Thorn in this way. Furthermore, the area of the Sea of Flowers determined the amount of sand created. At that moment, Lin Yuan stood up and felt refreshed. However, the one that truly benefited from Red Thorn's promotion to a silver/fantasy breed was the Acid Corrosion Queen Bee. The Acid Corrosion Queen Bee didn't do anything but be a bootlicker. Not only did the house expand by several times, but it was also luxuriously renovated for free. In the future, the Acid Corrosion Queen Bee could eat various flavors of acid. With good food and a good place to stay, the Acid Corrosion Queen Bee was simply a winner in life. This meant that a bootlicker would have everything in the end. Lin Yuan stored Red Thorn and the Acid Corrosion Queen Bee back into the leaf-shaped diamond face storage box. Red Thorn could maintain a state of 60 Eyes of Relinquish based on the Eyes of Relinquish's characteristics. Lin Yuan could not help but want to complain that Red Thorn was simply a cheat. After exiting the tree hole, Lin Yuan looked at the feather-like snow that had dyed the green world with a layer of white. Feeling the goose feather snowflakes falling on his face, that itchy feeling, Lin Yuan suddenly sneezed. At that moment, the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer walked over. "Congratulations, a bronze fantasy breed Fae is considered a great opportunity," Lin Yuan said hurriedly. "It's all thanks to you using the law rune to enlighten Red Thorn. Otherwise, I don't know how long it would take for Red Thorn to advance from bronze to fantasy." Lin Yuan's words stunned Endless Summer. On the one hand, Endless Summer did not expect that after becoming Lin Yuan's guardian, she would still address herself as senior. To a certain extent, a guardian was equivalent to a high-class servant. Another reason was that Endless Summer didn't expect Lin Yuan to really be stuck at bronze and intended to let Red Thorn evolve into a fantasy breed. This showed how broad the horizons of this young man were. "Wealth is so abundant. Young master, just call me Endless Summer. Otherwise, if young master keeps calling me senior as your protector, I can't not call you young master." Endless Summer looked at Lin Yuan carefully with eyes filled with gratitude. Endless Summer would have definitely died in that disaster, but because of the youth in front of her, she managed to survive. After sorting it out, Lin Yuan said, "That's right. Endless Summer, the mother of Bloodbath, and I plan to return to the royal capital. Shall we go together?" Endless Summer nodded gently. "Of course." After speaking, Endless Summer looked at Lin Yuan solemnly. "Lin Yuan, just let me know if you have any instructions in the future." For Fays, they would always help their kin and not reason. Therefore, to Endless Summer, all people and things that harmed Lin Yuan were its enemies. Lin Yuan looked at Endless Summer's solemn expression and said, "Okay, then I'll have to trouble you in the future, Endless Summer." After saying that, Lin Yuan took out his cell phone and prepared to call for a flying Fae to pick him up. At this moment, Endless Summer shouted. It was a Diamond 7/Epic Storm long-winged falcon, and the sound of violent winds could be heard. Ninth Watch, end of chapter. Chapter 316. The Diamond 7/Epic Storm long-winged falcon lay obediently on the ground. Endless Summer said with a smile, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. There's no need to go through so much trouble. This falcon flies very fast." When Lin Yuan saw it, he nodded in agreement. Weren't falcons the fastest flying birds? Lin Yuan, Endless Summer, and the mother of Bloodbath rode on the storm long-winged falcon's back and headed for the royal capital. After flying for just over a day, it was as though the world had changed. They had left the northern direction and the snow could no longer be seen. Lin Yuan looked at the vast mountains and rivers below the storm long-winged falcon with a calm expression. At that moment, Lin Yuan felt that his training in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift and the harvest in the depths of the Endless Forest had greatly improved him. Now Lin Yuan was going to return to the royal capital and was preparing to apply for his guild club during the S tournament. He would now return to the royal capital and prepare to take advantage of the start of the S tournament in the next few months to apply for his guild club. Even if the floating island whale had yet to hatch, Lin Yuan would return to the royal capital and prepare to apply for his guild club during these few months. Even if the floating island whale had not hatched yet, Lin Yuan could first outline the embryonic form of his personal strength. After everything was done, the Radiance 100 sequence selection should begin. The Diamond 7/Epic Storm Long-Winged Falcon flew all the way and took less than 2 days to reach the royal capital. The Diamond 7/Epic Storm Long-Winged Falcon was much faster than the Diamond Divine Travel Black Swallow. However, the Storm Long-Winged Falcon was very violent and was a ferocious bird that was adept at attacking. Had it not been for the two suzerain/myth phase, Endless Summer and the Mother of Bloodbath, holding it back, this Storm Long-Winged Falcon would not have been so obedient and sent the three of them back to the royal capital. Some of the Radiance Federation's organizations that rented Flying Phase would have thought of capturing the Storm Long-Winged Falcon to nurture. The Storm Long-Winged Falcon might be relatively docile to the Creation Master who nurtured it to evolve and increase its grade. However, it was obviously unrealistic to send the Storm Long-Winged Falcon to fly as a passenger. Unless the Creation Master was willing to be the driver on the Storm Long-Winged Falcon's back. This was the only way to ensure that the Storm Long-Winged Falcon wouldn't casually attack others. However, it was obviously impossible for a Creation Master to be the pilot. The Creation Master who could nurture the Storm Long-Winged Falcon would at least be a Class 3 Creation Master. No organization that rented Flying Phase would be able to afford the price of a Creation Master of such a rank as a pilot. On the Storm Long-Winged Falcon's back, he had ordered a Diamond Phase storage box from Star Web's Ostrich Logistics for Endless Summer. After all, without spatial storage equipment like the Diamond Phase storage box to store personal items, everything would be inconvenient. In the past, Endless Summer was still in the form of a plant and didn't need to store any items. However, now that Endless Summer had taken human form, there had to be a place to store all the resources and loot that Endless Summer had obtained. At that time, Lin Yuan had looked at Endless Summer's body weaponization bracelet. After these pink and purple hydrangeas become smaller, they look like bells on the bracelet. As a result, when customizing the Diamond Phase storage box, Endless Summer had expressed that she wanted to customize the Diamond Phase storage box into the shape of a pink and purple bell. He then mysteriously expressed that he would hang the pinkish-purple bell-shaped Diamond Phase storage box on the bracelet as a pendant. It was originally a very ordinary statement, but it made Lin Yuan's eyes narrow. Endless Summer looked very gentle and was dressed in a pink and purple silk dress like a lady. But her thoughts seemed a little deep. No matter what the Diamond Phase storage box looked like, anyone who understood Diamond Phase storage boxes would still be able to recognize it at a glance. Endless Summer had customized this Diamond Phase storage box into the shape of a pink and purple bell and hung it on her body weaponization bracelet. It was equivalent to using the pink and purple bell-shaped Diamond Phase storage box as a smokescreen. It would make people feel that this body weaponization bracelet was an accessory to match the pink and purple bell-shaped Diamond Phase storage box. It would weaken the presence of the body weaponization bracelet. Therefore, if there was really a conflict, there was a high chance that people would not look at the body weaponization bracelet on Endless Summer's wrist. Endless Summer's attack method was a spiritual attack. Therefore, as long as Endless Summer activated the body weaponization bracelet, it would be able to instantly release an extremely powerful spiritual attack. This pinkish-purple bell-shaped Diamond Phase storage box was equivalent to giving Endless Summer's body weaponization bracelet a chance to launch a sneak attack every time it attacked. In Lin Yuan's opinion, this was simply black-bellied. However, it was also in line with the way of survival for Phase. After arriving at the royal capital, Lin Yuan did not return to his mansion immediately. Instead, he headed straight for the Leaning Moon Mountain and the Radiant Moon Palace. At that moment, the Mother of Bloodbath brought Endless Summer to buy a cell phone. Along the way, the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer also went to apply for a new Star Web card. At the same time, they also bought some daily necessities. However, the mother of Bloodbath was a little disappointed. While the mother of Bloodbath had been selling all kinds of delicacies to Endless Summer was not very interested. When Endless Summer got the cell phone and saw those exquisite accessories and clothes, her eyes lit up. Lin Yuan felt that after this Fae reached suzerain/myth, one of the two beside him had the foodie attribute, while the other had awakened the attribute of buying good-looking accessories. This caused Lin Yuan's perception of myth breed Faes to change. No matter what grade a Fae reached in front of an unguarded person, it was just like an ordinary person. It was a very lively life with 7 emotions and 6 desires. Lin Yuan returned to the royal capital and was preparing to go to the Leaning Moon Mountain's Radiant Moon Palace as his first stop. At that moment, the Moon Empress was standing in the Radiant Moon Palace's inner palace's breeding room, in front of a rather strange long porcelain table. This long porcelain table did not look very smooth and had a slight curve. The surface of the long porcelain table looked very smooth, and it should be very difficult for such a curve to be placed on this long porcelain table. It would not fall off the surface of this long porcelain table. However, there were still many things on this table. When the things on the table were placed on this long porcelain table, they seemed to be attracted by this long porcelain table. The long white porcelain table was constantly emitting a majestic water elemental energy. This majestic water element energy was even denser than the water element pearls that Lin Yuan had induced to spit out in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Chapter 10, End of this chapter. Chapter 317. But the aquamarine elemental shellfish was a living creature. But this white curved table was clearly a dead object. At that moment, Kai Cha, who was standing beside the Moon Empress, poured a cup of tea that was brewed with the leaves of the dark flower dreamy fragrant tea. Kai Cha placed the tea brewed with the leaves of the Dutchman's dream fragrant tea on the curved white porcelain table and said softly, "Moon Empress, your pearl hairpin jade 9-petal plum blossom is blooming better and better." Upon hearing that, the Moon Empress stopped trimming the jade hairpin 9-petal plum's branches. The Moon Empress looked at the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom that she had just trimmed. The jade hairpin plum blossom produced by the jade hairpin 9-petal plum would only bloom once every 3 years if it wasn't for the water elemental energy provided by the whale bone. When Kai Cha heard the Moon Empress words, she couldn't help but scratch her head and had an awkward expression. Kai Cha had always thought that the Moon Empress used the whale bone to make the long table so that she wouldn't have to water the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom. He didn't expect that the Moon Empress was actually trying to speed up the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom's maturation. The material used for this long porcelain table was the whale bone of a Myth 3 cetacean fae. The Myth 3 whale fae's whale bone was far more precious than this jade hairpin 9-petal plum. Although the jade hairpin 9-petal plum was a heaven and earth spirit treasure, its effects were rather weak compared to other heaven and earth spirits. This was because the jade hairpin plum blossom's petals could only protect one's hair. However, this kind of hair-protecting ability was rather unorthodox among heaven and earth spirit treasures. However, it was very useful for some specific faes. For example, if some furry animal species faes used the jade hairpin 9-petaled plum's petals, the jade hairpin 9-petaled plum's petals wouldn't be able to withstand it. It could greatly increase the brightness and luster of the fur. For example, the Moon Empress always used the jade hairpin 9-petal plum's petals to concoct spirit fluids for her contracted fae, the Calamity sun-swallowing fox. Of course, the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom was especially sought after because it could cure baldness, reduce receding hairline. Therefore, the price was directly raised to a sky-high price. However, if the Moon Empress wasn't in the mood to prune the plum branches, she wouldn't be able to do so. He probably didn't even have the qualifications to be brought to the rear hall. However, when Kai Cha thought about it, she realized that the Radiant Moon Palace had precious spiritual items that couldn't be seen in the outside world. After all, the Moon Empress had casually nurtured them and placed them in a corner to collect dust. However, Kai Cha didn't know that when the Moon Empress was trimming the branches, she wasn't trimming the flowers but the heart. The Moon Empress was still trimming the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom. Unknowingly, the jade hairpin eternal plum blossom had been trimmed down by the Moon Empress. From the Moon Empress' point of view, life was like a branch. No matter how he cut it, he would always feel that something was not perfect after the first cut and the next cut. However, the Moon Empress pruning method was different. The Moon Empress would only keep what she wanted and cut off what she felt was unnecessary. As he continued to cut, he managed to create the flavor of "the wind rises and the winter becomes cold, the winter plum blossoms bloom in the evening." The jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom produced numerous and messy plum blossoms. It became a little tacky because there were too many of them. The jade-like 9-petal hairpin flower bloomed on the plum branches as though it was covered with a layer of snow. However, under the Moon Empress pruning, the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom now had 9 plum blossoms and 9 petals. In addition, the plum branches were bold and had a hint of elegance, making it look very perfect. The Moon Empress looked at the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom that she was more and more satisfied with. There is a special charm in the fragrance and it doesn't know the cold. It is going to be a new year soon. Before Kai Cha could understand the meaning of the Moon Empress words, Mystic Moon's clear voice came from the rear hall's door. "Moon Empress, young lord is back." The Moon Empress, who was about to continue trimming the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom, immediately put down her hand. There was an elegant smile on his face. "Mystic Moon, roast one of the 2 spirit savory pigs that you brought back from Chef Supreme." Mystic Moon immediately accepted the order and went to make the arrangements. Lin Yuan was already in front of the Radiant Moon Palace's door. When he saw the 2 silver stamen gold luster caches in front of the Radiant Moon Palace, he realized that the current scene was very different from when he had left 1.5 months ago. The silver stamen gold luster cache that had become lush but didn't have a willpower rune and maintained its grade at Diamond X/Legend was still lush and full of silver stamen gold luster cache flowers. However, the silver stamen gold luster cache that had comprehended a willpower rune but had dropped a tree of flowers and green leaves and had fallen into a deep sleep. At this time the tree was already full of tender leaves. Although its height was similar to that of the Diamond X/Legend silver stamen gold luster cache, it had comprehended a willpower rune and reached suzerain. The newly grown tender leaves were filled with flower buds. The flower buds hid gold and silver, and it looked very different from the silver stamen gold luster cache's silver stamen gold luster cache. The suzerain silver stamen gold luster cache had comprehended a willpower rune, and its newly grown tender leaves were filled with flower buds. If the suzerain silver stamen gold luster cache's flowers were like stars, the suzerain silver stamen gold luster cache's silver stamen gold luster cache's flower bud was like a small sun. It shone with a bright gold-silver luster. When this suzerain silver stamen gold luster cache reached Fantasy V, it would welcome its first world cleansing and become a myth breed. Lin Yuan entered the Radiant Moon Palace's inner palace with ease. He immediately saw his master, the Moon Empress, sitting there waiting for him. Upon seeing Lin Yuan in the inner palace, Kai Cha immediately poured a cup of spirit tea from the jade porcelain teapot on the table and handed it to Lin Yuan. "Young lord, it's dry and windy outside. Drink some spirit tea to moisten your throat." Lin Yuan took the spirit tea and took a sip. Auntie Kai Cha's tea is still the same as before. So mellow and fragrant. The Moon Empress picked up a red and green spirit fruit from the table and peeled the skin. In just 2 or 3 strokes, the skin of the spirit fruit was completely peeled off. The Moon Empress handed it to Lin Yuan and asked, "What about the Radiance 100 sequence? Didn't you say that you'll only be back before the Radiance 100 sequence test? Why is it so early? Did something happen?" After taking the spirit fruit from the Moon Empress, Lin Yuan took a bite, and the fruit fragrance burst in his mouth. The rich fruit fragrance was accompanied by abundant juice, and it was very sweet. The Radiant Moon Palace's spirit fruit was not a particularly precious variety. Instead, it was a kind of apple that could be sold in the market. However, the Radiant Moon Palace's apple was grown from a diamond apple tree. Although it was the same thing, it tasted very different. Kai Cha watched as the Moon Empress peeled off the diamond apple's skin and peeled it so perfectly. She could not help but recall the first time the Moon Empress peeled an apple for the young lord, and she seemed to be a little flustered. Chapter 11. End of this chapter. Chapter 3:18. In the past few months, the Moon Empress had done many things that she wouldn't normally do. In this world, The only person who could make the Moon Empress peel an apple personally was probably the young lord. When Lin Yuan heard the Moon Empress question, he took a bite of the peeled apple and placed it on the table. The training has ended early. I came back earlier to celebrate the new year with Master. The Moon Empress had been worried that Lin Yuan had encountered some problems. Now that he heard it, the smile on his face immediately became even wider. He pointed to the lotus pond not far away and said, "These lotus fays in the lotus pond have all been promoted to suzerain. The lotus root powder made from the ground lotus roots of these suzerain lotus fays is the most delicious. In addition to the osmanthus flowers from the suzerain silver stamen gold luster kasha outside the radiant moon palace, I can ask Mystic Moon to cook the silver stamen gold luster kasha's osmanthus flowers and the lotus roots of these lotus fays to make lotus root powder and osmanthus candy." When Kai Cha heard the Moon Empress words, she couldn't help but shiver. Isn't it too exaggerated for the Moon Empress to dote on the young lord? The essence of the suzerain lotus flower fay was in the lotus seeds and lotus roots. Although lotus seeds were rarer than lotus roots and could only be produced once every 3 years, lotus roots could be produced every year. However, how rare were the osmanthus flowers from the suzerain lotus fay's lotus roots and the suzerain silver stamen gold luster kasha? At that moment, those suzerain lotus fays in the lotus pond in the rear palace had already developed considerable intelligence. After hearing the words of the Moon Empress, they all trembled. These lotus fays, which had risked their lives to break through to the suzerain grade in order to stay in the Radiant Moon Palace's inner palace, could not help but have doubts. Back then he had spent so much effort to stand out from his own kind and evolve to the Lord tier. He had thought that he had become a winner in life. But now it seemed that his brothers who had been moved to the garden outside the palace were better off. In the future, every time His Highness came, the lotus root that he had painstakingly grown would be shortened. After dinner, Lin Yuan and the Moon Empress had a question-and-answer session. The Moon Empress couldn't help but be rather surprised from the question-and-answer session. It seemed like her disciple had grown a lot in the past 2 months. This was because only when a person stood at a certain height could they ask questions that needed to be considered at that height. The level of Lin Yuan's questions was obviously much higher than before. The Moon Empress' answers were as detailed as possible, and every answer allowed Lin Yuan to understand thoroughly and gain enlightenment. Before leaving the Radiant Moon Palace, Lin Yuan spoke to the Moon Empress seriously. "Master, I've decided to establish my own private force starting this month." The Moon Empress replied with a smile. "Building a private force. If you can make your own force a cloud in the sky, don't make it a mountain that falls to the ground." Ever since Lin Yuan had left the Radiant Moon Palace, he had been thinking about the Moon Empress' words. At this time Xianyu walked to the back hall and said, "Moon Empress, young lord is planning to establish his own faction. Do you want me to help?" The Moon Empress shook her head. The Moon Empress understood Lin Yuan's nature and principles, so she also understood how independent he was. If it was any other matter, the Moon Empress might be able to help him in secret due to her selfishness as a teacher. However, when it came to matters like private forces, it wasn't something that could be easily helped. As long as the faction controlled by the Moon Empress intervened and helped Lin Yuan, the Moon Empress would not be able to defeat Lin Yuan. That was equivalent to sending a message to the outside world that Lin Yuan's faction was under the protection of the Moon Empress. If that was really the case, the faction that Lin Yuan had painstakingly built would become a vassal of the Radiant Moon Palace in the eyes of the other factions. As a teacher, the Moon Empress would pave the way for her students. However, he would not become a stumbling block in his students' path because of his pampering. The Moon Empress looked at Mystic Moon and said, "My disciple has grown up and wants to explore the world by himself. As his master, I can only guarantee that my disciple will not be bullied by others. As for the rest, let him fly by himself." Mystic Moon was listening to the Moon Empress, but as he listened he realized that the Moon Empress was looking at him with a strange gaze. There was a proud look in his eyes. The Moon Empress said, "Why am I telling you this? You don't have a disciple, so how can you understand the feelings of a master who has accepted an outstanding disciple?" Xianyu put on a puzzled expression. He could not help but complain in his heart. "I've long known about His Highness' excellence." Lin Yuan had walked out of the Radiant Moon Palace and descended the Leaning Moon Mountain. Due to the previous question-and-answer exercise, it was already dusk when he came out. 10 days ago, there was a snowfall in the outskirts of the capital. However, when Lin Yuan returned from the depths of the endless forest in the north, he felt a chill run down his spine. The royal capital had already warmed up. Even in the evening, the temperature wouldn't drop below 15 degrees. Although the temperature in the royal capital was not low, the wind was not small. The night breeze blew the hair in front of Lin Yuan's forehead, revealing his smooth forehead. At this time, the sky was already filled with the sunset glow. The glow fell on the youth's forehead, elongating his silhouette. The training in the controlled Class 3 Abyss-dimensional rift had given him a yardstick to measure a person's heart. This trip to the endless forest steppes had let him know that this world was very big, and he was still very small. However, the vastness of the world was also urging and attracting Lin Yuan. It made Lin Yuan firmly believe that although he was currently insignificant, he could use his own footsteps to cross the river, step over the mountains, step onto the clouds and touch the light at the dome. The autumn wind kept blowing on Lin Yuan's body, but Lin Yuan's footsteps became more and more firm. What was the phrase, green hills with clear water? It was the phrase, calm and unperturbed. This world was really beautiful. In this life, Lin Yuan had a younger sister, a teacher and friends. Therefore, even if Lin Yuan was not a greedy person, he could not help but have the thought of being intoxicated and not returning. Everything was so calm in the late autumn dusk. However, as he stepped on the thick soil, the sunset glow turned into a cocoon, and his body was covered in the sky. Lin Yuan had completely integrated into this world. There was no longer a trace of the feeling of a transmigrator. Lin Yuan returned to his mansion in the royal capital and could not help but look forward to seeing Wen Yu and Lu Jia. Based on this time, in a few days, Lu Jia would go through the internal channels to conduct the Radiance 100 sequence ranking. Therefore, Lu Jia should have returned to the mansion at this time. After 3 years of silence, Lu Jia was also going to take back the glory that he had protected with his life. However, when Lin Yuan entered his mansion, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. After over a month, the mansion had undergone tremendous changes compared to before Lin Yuan had left. Chapter 12, End of this chapter. Chapter 319. If the previous layout of the mansion was just a simple decoration embryo, then the entire mansion had been refined into a work of art. All of this was obviously done by Hu Quan. In Hu Quan, Lin Yuan could see a kind of spirit craftsman's pursuit of art. He was paranoid and loved it. It was clearly a very tiring thing, but Hu Quan was full of enthusiasm when doing it. The elegance of this mansion was vividly displayed under Hu Quan's design. Due to the 3 Riverland Carp's exclusive skill, Place of Life, the bamboo phase in the 3,000-meter-tall bamboo forest absorbed the 250,000 kilogram high-grade energy or debris in the land and kept growing. When the wind blew in the mansion, it would bring a hint of bamboo fragrance. It had a bit of the elegance of the bamboo stream in the green forest. The more Lin Yuan looked at the changes in the mansion, the more he could not help but have a trace of doubt. Could this Class 4 spirit craftsman Hu Quan have been sculpting and designing in the mansion without rest day and night? After entering the main mansion's door, Lin Yuan found that the completely jade-textured wood in the mansion was used extremely well. All kinds of completely jade-textured wood were carved into hollows and embedded in the inside of the ceiling walls. The entire ceiling walls exuded that kind of tranquil jade-textured luster. All kinds of completely jade-textured wood carved ornaments and utensils were placed there. Every detail in the mansion was filled with a natural and warm smell. However, Lin Yuan touched his nose. Although the smell of art came at him, it seemed that the smell of art was far less amazing than the smell of luxury. Lu Jia had pasted a patch made of completely jade-textured wood on the largest wall in the main mansion. On the patch, there were many fine jade-textured wood particles embedded in it. Lin Yuan could already see the rough appearance of the wall scene inlaid with many fine jade-textured wood particles. It was Lin Yuan himself on this wall. Apart from Lin Yuan, there was also Chimey, Genius, Red Thorn, Source Sand, and the Blue Flash Purple Butterfly. There was also Wen Yu, her Moonlight Egret, and the Earth Surge Golden Lotus. There was also Wen Yu, her Moonlight Egret, and the Earth Surge Golden Lotus. There was also Lu Jia and his contracted Source-type Insect Queen. At that moment, Wen Yu was helping Hu Quan in the house. Hu Quan was also carving something. After seeing this wall, Lin Yuan's heart uncontrollably warmed up. Ever since the royal capital's mansion had been constructed, Lin Yuan had never treated it as something that belonged to him. In his opinion, this was his Lu Jie's Wenyu's and the mother of bloodbath's common home. But now he had to add Endless Summer into the family. Although this family had many members, Lin Yuan was the core of this family. Lu Jie was Lin Yuan's retainer knight. Wenyu was his creation master assistant, the mother of bloodbath was his path protector, and Endless Summer was his protector. But now, the Class 4 spirit craftsman Hu Quan was working hard to make Lin Yuan feel like he wanted to give employees benefits. Hu Quan's relationship with Lu Jie, Wenyu, the mother of bloodbath, and Endless Summer was different. Lin Yuan and Hu Quan only had a special employer-employee relationship. Although Hu Quan had used many of Lin Yuan's completely jade-textured wood, he had worked so hard. However, the things that Lu Jie carved out of the completely jade-textured wood also belonged to Lin Yuan. At the end of the day, when Hu Quan signed the contract in order to be able to use a large amount of completely jade-textured wood, he signed himself as a tool. At that moment she suddenly looked up and saw Lin Yuan. At first, Wenyu thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her. After blinking her eyes, she immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He ran over happily and said, "Young master, I thought you would only return after the tournament ends in a month." After saying that, she saw that Lin Yuan was looking at the wall made of completely jade-textured wood fragments. "Young master," Uncle Hu Quan saw that there was no place to use the completely jade-textured wood fragments, so he wanted to make a wall scenery. Lin Yuan looked at the wall scenery that was only half painted. His image was right in the middle of the wall. Beside him were Wenyu and Lu Jie, and there were quite a few empty seats. At that moment, Lin Yuan's desire to establish his own faction was even stronger. In this life, Lin Yuan was just an 18-year-old youth. Lin Yuan believed that in the process of his growth, the gaps on the wall scenery would be filled by all kinds of people and phase. Whether compared to the red sandalwood longevity fish tank made of completely jade-textured red sandalwood or those carved completely jade-textured ornaments, this wall scenery looked a little inconspicuous. However, in Lin Yuan's opinion, this was the warmest place in the mansion. At that moment, Lin Yuan found that Hu Quan had also put down his work and walked in front of him very solemnly. Lin Yuan saw Hu Quan bow toward him and say in a solemn and grateful tone, "Thank you, Lin Yuan." "Thank you, Lin Yuan." Lin Yuan was a little confused. What did Hu Quan have to thank him for? If he had to say thanks, Hu Quan would not take a single cent of his salary. Lin Yuan felt that he should be the one saying thanks. At that moment, Wenyu explained at the side. "Young master, Uncle Hu Quan comprehended a willpower rune when he was making this wall scenery a week ago." Lin Yuan did not expect that Hu Quan would have such an opportunity. He could comprehend a willpower rune when he was making this wall scenery. However, Hu Quan did not have to thank him so much for comprehending a willpower rune, right? At that moment, Lin Yuan heard Hu Quan speak. "If it weren't for the fact that I felt something when I saw the red sandalwood longevity fish tank that you set up in your manor, and the fact that there were so many completely jade-textured wood that I couldn't figure out when I was carving, I would never have comprehended this willpower rune." As he spoke, Hu Quan, a middle-aged man who looked a little unserious, actually choked a little. Lin Yuan hurriedly said, "Congratulations, Uncle Hu. Congratulations, Uncle Hu. With this willpower rune, Uncle Hu can have another fantasy breed fae." Until then, Lin Yuan still did not understand why Hu Quan was so excited. At that moment, Lin Yuan saw Hu Quan's face suddenly reveal the kind of high spirits that only youths often had. "I only comprehended one willpower rune in the previous half of my life. My spirit craftsman skills have long reached the standard of Class 5. However, the basic requirement to become a Class 5 spirit craftsman is to have 2 fantasy breed faes. I've finally reached it now." At that moment, Lin Yuan finally knew why Hu Quan had been so excited before. As a spirit craftsman, Hu Quan had long regarded spirit craftsmen as more important than spirit chi professionals in this aspect. Chapter 13, end of this chapter. Chapter 320. Otherwise, Hu Quan would not have contracted faes that assisted the spirit craftsman's work. Lin Yuan was truly happy for Hu Quan. A person with a dream and constantly working hard for it would always succeed. When Lin Yuan had seen the crane shadow sensor that Hu Quan had carved, he had been attracted by Hu Quan's spirit craftsman skills. He had not expected that Hu Quan's spirit craftsman skills were already not at the Class 4 spirit craftsman standard. However, because Hu Quan had not comprehended the second willpower rune, there was no second fantasy breed Fey and he was stuck at the strength of a spirit chi professional. Therefore, Hu Quan was stuck as a Class 4 spirit craftsman and had been unable to become a Class 5 spirit craftsman. Hu Quan pondered for a moment and took out the contract he had signed with Lin Yuan from his diamond Fey storage box and handed it to him. He handed it to Lin Yuan and said, "Lin Yuan, I want to annul this contract." Lin Yuan's expression froze, but he immediately smiled and said, "Sure, Uncle Hu. Sure, Uncle Hu. No problem." A Class 5 spirit craftsman was already considered a big shot in the Radiance Federation. Although a spirit craftsman was not as noble as a creation master, any Class 5 lifestyle class spirit chi professional was enough to be called a foundation-level resource. Therefore, Lin Yuan could understand that Hu Quan wanted to annul the contract. At that time, the contract that Lin Yuan and Hu Quan had signed was relatively loose on the issue of staying or leaving, so it could be annulled easily. However, at that moment Lin Yuan heard Hu Quan's words change. "I also want to stay in this mansion and become a part of it like when you and Wuxia." Lin Yuan was a little stunned when he heard Hu Quan's words. Hu Quan didn't know about his creation master abilities or Black's identity. Therefore, in Lin Yuan's opinion, Hu Quan's current decision was a little surprising. "Since Uncle Hu, a Class 5 spirit craftsman, has spoken, I'm naturally very happy to accept. It's also an honor for this mansion to be a part of it. May I know your conditions?" When Hu Quan heard Lin Yuan ask about his conditions, he immediately laughed and replied, "The conditions are still the same as before. The conditions are still the same as before. I just want to have completely jade-textured wood for me to use." Hu Quan added, "The conditions are still the same as before. Just like so much completely jade-textured wood in this month." Hu Quan could now be considered half a Class 5 creation master. As long as he obtained the Radiance Federation's official recognition, his status and prestige would be greatly enhanced. If Hu Quan was willing, he could become an honored guest of the various major powers. But in Hu Quan's opinion, it was useless. Could fame and prestige be used as countless pieces of completely jade-textured wood? It could be said that in this 1 month, Hu Quan had experienced the true happiness of the world. Not to mention the fact that the jade-textured wood was so cool to use. Just by looking at the environment of the manor's main residence, Hu Quan felt that it was not an exaggeration to describe it as a fairyland. Therefore, after knowing that he could become a Class 5 spirit craftsman, he immediately made a decision after hesitating for a while. Hu Quan decided to tie himself up as soon as possible. If other Class 4 spirit craftsmen found out that Lin Yuan had so many completely jade-textured wood to use and came over to negotiate, wouldn't he lose the initiative? Due to Hu Quan's impatience, he became a part of this manor and was also a Class 4 spirit craftsman who was about to become a Class 5 spirit craftsman. This time he did not sign a written contract with Hu Quan. There was also no need to go to the Radiance Federation to apply for certification. This time Hu Quan used his newly comprehended willpower rune to swear an oath and accept the supervision of the will of heaven and earth. Just like that, when both Hu Quan and Lin Yuan felt that they had taken advantage of the situation, another member was added to the mansion. Hu Quan was now considered one of Lin Yuan's people. Lin Yuan pointed at the wall at the side and said, "That's right. Uncle Hu, you can add yourself to the wall as well." Hearing this, Hu Quan chuckled and said, "I've prepared all the materials. I'm just waiting for your approval before I can put myself on it." After chatting for a while, Lin Yuan asked when he didn't see Wuxia, "Where's Brother Lu?" When you said, "Brother Lu said he went out to buy groceries. He should be back soon." For some reason, when he looked at her, he suddenly felt that she seemed to have changed a lot in the past 1.5 months. He became much steadier. After speaking to them, Lin Yuan returned to his room and washed up. After washing up, he put on the spirit chi clothes that when you had prepared. He looked at the time and called Wuxia. The phone rang less than 3 times before Wuxia picked it up. "Big Brother Lu, I'm back at the mansion. When are you coming back?" Upon hearing that, Wuxia immediately replied, "I'll be home in half an hour." When he hung up the phone, Lin Yuan could clearly hear the joy in Wuxia's tone after hearing that he had returned to the mansion. On the other end of the line, Lu Jia suddenly felt himself patting his arm. He looked back and found that it was Bai Hao. At that moment Bai Hao said, "Lu Jia, what happened to make you so happy? The corners of your mouth almost reached your temples when you picked up the phone." When he picked up the phone, the corners of his mouth almost reached his temples. Lu Jia had long been familiar with Bai Hao's way of speaking. Lu Jia was already used to Bai Hao's way of speaking. Bai Hao's words were as sharp as needles. Bai Hao's heart was more fragile than glass, but when the layer of glass on the surface faded, Bai Hao's heart was softer than anyone else's. This was also why Lu Jia could always be friends with Bai Hao. Lu Jia had long been used to Bai Hao's sharp tongue. "Tell me, what's the matter? Hurry up and jump. I'm anxious to get home." Lu Jia felt somewhat helpless. He had come out to buy some spiritual ingredients. As a result, he bumped into Bai Hao, who had just finished a match in the S tournament. When he saw Lu Jia, he asked him to accompany him to buy clothes. During this period of time, Bai Hao had been depressed because his favorite streamer, Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess, had not appeared. In order to take care of Bai Hao's mood, Lu Jia agreed to accompany him. As a result, when he arrived at the clothing store, Bai Hao was as happy as ever. Lu Jia seriously suspected that Bai Hao missed the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess so much because he liked the feeling of rewarding in the live stream. Bai Hao asked, holding a pile of spiritual energy clothes. "Which one do you think looks better on me? I like so many of them. I can't possibly buy all of them." Looking at the pile of clothes, Lu Jia felt a headache coming on. How long would it take for Bai Hao to try them on one by one? Lu Jia said, "Every time you buy a piece of clothing, you will have to give one less gift to the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess's live stream. Every 10 pieces of clothing you buy will bring you closer to the second place. Every 100 pieces of clothing you buy, you will have to sit at the back of the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess's fan meet and concert." Chapter 14, End of this chapter. Chapter 321. As soon as Bai Hao heard that, he put down his clothes, grabbed Lu Jia's hand and pulled him out of the room. Lu Jia sighed. It seemed like Bai Hao was serious about this. Bai Hao really liked the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess and did not like the feeling of rewarding in the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess live streaming room. However, it was also because of this that it was more difficult. Bai Hao did not know who the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess was and only knew her singing. Bai Hao was not in the mood to shop and went straight back to his guild club. Lu Jia also returned to the mansion with the fresh spiritual ingredients he had just bought. Lu Jia had been training for more than a month and had inscribed the Hurricane Owlet Moth template with the Insect Queen's Platinum ability. This made Lu Jia confident that he could rank in the top 30 in the Radiance 100 sequence. It was even possible to say that if Lu Jia burst out with all his strength, he might enter the top 20. However, Lu Jia did not dare to guarantee all this. Although Lu Jia had become stronger in the past 3 years, how could the other Radiance 100 sequence members not become stronger? Therefore, Lu Jia did not intend to expose all his strength in this sequence ranking. He would be fine as long as he could fight for the top 30 in the Radiance 100 sequence. The change in strength during this training made Lu Jia a little more confident after knowing Black's identity. Upon entering the mansion, Lu Jia saw Lin Yuan eating fruits and drinking tea with Wen Yu and Hu Quan. Lu Jia hurriedly went up to greet them and then took the fresh spiritual ingredients to cook. After all, it was already quite late. The sun was setting in the west and even the sunset glow had disappeared. It was replaced by faint stars that dotted the sky. Lin Yuan and Wen Yu hurriedly went to the kitchen to help, but they were driven out by Lu Jia. Not only did Lu Jia not let Lin Yuan enter the kitchen, but he also did not let Wen Yu in. Although Lu Jia was not a chef, he was more willing to turn his joy into food to share with his companions. This was the romance of Lu Jia, a man who was not very good with words. Lin Yuan hurriedly shouted into the kitchen. "Big brother Lu, cook a little more. 2 more people will come for dinner tonight." As soon as Lu Jia heard that, he came out of the kitchen and looked at Lin Yuan seriously. "How much do they eat?" Lin Yuan did not know how much Endless Summer ate, but he thought of how the mother of Bloodbath ate. "Big, very big." Lu Jia asked in disbelief when he heard that. "Does she have a bigger appetite than Wen Yu?" When Wen Yu heard Lu Jia's words, she felt as if she had been struck by a bolt from the blue. Lu Jia was really hopeless. Lin Yuan was still more normal. At that moment, Lu Jia heard Lin Yuan's voice. Even if when you can eat 4 bowls of rice in one meal, she can't eat half of the amount of food that one of the people who came for dinner tonight can eat. Lu Jia calculated his appetite and went back to the kitchen to cook. When Wenyu heard his words, she felt that the lightning that had struck her head had turned and struck back into the sky. Then a thunderstorm descended from the sky. What did it mean to be able to eat 4 bowls of rice in one meal? Wenyu could not help but sigh in her heart. It was fine that Lu Jia was a straight man, but even his young master Lin Yuan was a straight man. However, a question popped up in Wenyu's mind. When did I eat 4 bowls of rice? At most he had only eaten 3.5 bowls. Lu Jia went into the kitchen to cook. In a short while the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer returned to the mansion. This time the mother of Bloodbath did not immediately transform into its spider form and lie on the roof beam. On one hand, it was because Endless Summer had also come to the mansion. On the other hand, although everyone in the mansion was already familiar with the mother of Bloodbath, the people in the mansion did not know the mother of Bloodbath. Except for when the mother of Bloodbath had transformed into its human form and sent Lin Yuan back when he had fainted, it had appeared once. Normally, the mother of Bloodbath had no sense of presence in the mansion. After such a long time they should get to know each other. When the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer came in, Wenyu and Huquan immediately went forward to greet them. Even Lu Jia, who was cooking in the kitchen, poked his head out and greeted them. However, Lin Yuan could clearly feel a sense of restraint from Endless Summer and the mother of Bloodbath. It was like a guest who had just come to someone else's house and was a little reserved when meeting the host. This was really not the style of suzerain/myth breed experts like the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer. Lin Yuan knew that whether it was the mother of Bloodbath or Endless Summer, they could already transform into human form. However, it had not been long since they could transform into human form. Whether it was the mother of Bloodbath or Endless Summer, they could actually transform into human form within the past 2 months. Therefore, the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer were not familiar with getting along with humans. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer were not like other fays that had been contracted by humans when they were young. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer had comprehended willpower runes and become myth breed fays on their own in a wild state. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer really did not have much experience in interacting with humans. Normally, the most direct way to solve some difficult problems was to speak with strength. However, everyone in this mansion was someone that the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer needed to get along with in the future. Lu Jia cooked very quickly. In less than an hour, the table made of completely jade-textured wood was filled with delicacies. According to Lin Yuan's instructions in advance, Lu Jia specially fried 3 large plates of chicken wings. The table was filled with sour, sweet, salty, fragrant, spicy, and everything except bitterness. This sumptuous meal seemed to have a magical power. During the meal, the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer became familiar with Lu Jia, Wenyu, and Huquan. Just as Lin Yuan thought that after eating, the mother of Bloodbath would once again turn into a spider and lie on the roof beam. At that moment, Wenyu had already started to help the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer clean up the empty room. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan could not help but feel that he had been too negligent. He had always thought that when the mother of Bloodbath returned to the mansion, it would lie on the roof beam outside. This was its unique lifestyle. However, he did not know that it was just because the mother of Bloodbath was not familiar with everyone, so it lived a lonely life. However, it was not too late to find out now. The addition of the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer immediately made this mansion lively. When playing the Fey Battle Flag game at night, each party would be on one side, and the 6 parties would attack each other, causing chaos. After playing a few rounds, Lin Yuan found that no matter how they played, Wenyu could win. Furthermore, she could consume the resources of the 5 parties with the least amount of resources and become the final winner. Chapter 15, End of this chapter. Chapter 322. When playing the Battle Flag game previously, Lin Yuan had felt that she was powerful, but she was not as monstrous as she was now. However, this also allowed him to see her ability in allocating resources from the side. Simply put, this ability was a kind of gambling ability. This gambling ability could be used in business or even a private faction's planning and operation. Lin Yuan planned to establish his own private faction. He had Endless Summer in terms of force, but he had never had a suitable helper in terms of strategy. If when you had the ability to deploy resources and plan an operation, she could completely help Lin Yuan solve a lot of problems. Lin Yuan was extremely concerned about building his own private faction. Moreover, Lin Yuan's character and way of doing things also determined that he would never be a hands-off shopkeeper in building his own private faction. Lin Yuan planned to find time to talk to Wen Yu about some ideas for building his private faction. After playing the battle flag game, everyone returned to their respective rooms. At that moment, Lin Yuan realized that Hu Quan did not return to his room to rest. Instead, he began to carefully carve the fine, completely jade-textured wood fragments of various colors in the living room. Lin Yuan could not help but remind him. "Uncle Hu, it's too late. Do it tomorrow. Your health is more important." Carving completely jade-textured wood would not make any noise. Lin Yuan was completely afraid that Hu Quan's body would not be able to take it if he stayed up all night. Even when Lin Yuan had been enhancing phase day and night, he had to ensure that he had 5 hours of rest every day. The body was the capital of everything. If the body collapsed, there would be nothing left. Hu Quan replied with a smile. "I'll process the fragments needed for the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer to make the wall scenery first so that they can be arranged for the wall scenery tomorrow." When Hu Quan said this, his eyes revealed a kind of warmth and deep meaning. The warmth was because Hu Quan had been alone with the spirit craftsman profession for so many years and had long been used to loneliness and solitude. But now that he had these companions, even though Hu Quan was already middle-aged, he still experienced a kind of peace at the dining table with his companions just now. Time was clear, people loved to play and laugh. No one was an isolated island. As for the deep meaning, Hu Quan had already seen that both the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer were suzerain/myth breed phase. Both the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer had changed their hair colors. However, Hu Quan was a king-class expert. Even if his aptitude wasn't considered high and he only had one fantasy breed Fae, Hu Quan was a king-class expert. However, he still had the necessary vision. Hu Quan felt that he could not see through Lin Yuan, but all this was not important to him. Hu Quan felt that since he had joined this mansion, it was equivalent to being on Lin Yuan's side. The moment everyone was on the same side, they had to share blessings and sorrows. Hu Quan had the awareness of being a follower. Hu Quan might not be able to help in other areas, but as long as it was something a Class 5 spirit craftsman could do, then Hu Quan would act as if no one was willing to let him do it. He returned to his room and released Genius from the spirit lock spatial zone. Lin Yuan had wanted to release Genius during the meal and let it eat with everyone. However, Genius wanted to accompany Chimey in the spirit lock spatial zone. Chimey usually gave Genius a headache and Genius had to help Chimey solve many of its problems. However, it was undeniable that Chimey was the most important family member to Genius apart from Lin Yuan. Genius knew that Chimey was evolving, improving its quality and becoming stronger. However, Genius was not anxious about itself at all. Genius felt that it was not an ambitious spirit beast. Genius knew that even when it was ugly, Lin Yuan had treated it as a treasure. No matter how weak it was, Lin Yuan would not despise it. In Genius' opinion, it was already a cat's happiness to be able to follow Lin Yuan and Chimey. Genius usually had the habit of licking its fur, but Lin Yuan still gave Genius a bath and helped it blow dry its fine white fur. This habit was formed when Lin Yuan had brought Genius home when it was still a 100 questions beast that could not even be considered a fae. After a few years, the habit had become natural. Genius no longer needed to bathe. However, as long as the conditions were met, Lin Yuan would still give Genius a bath once a month. After Lin Yuan returned to his room, he was not in a hurry to sleep. Instead, he was preparing to fight a celestial stairway duel on Star Web. After all, ever since Lin Yuan had ascended the celestial stairway, he had not fought a single celestial stairway duel. At present, Lin Yuan's celestial stairway stars were only 0 stars. Even if Lin Yuan had the celestial stairway's exclusive title and could extend the time limit for celestial stairway duels. However, Lin Yuan felt that there was no need to use this privilege. Lin Yuan originally wanted to go through the celestial stairway duel as usual. However, at that moment Lin Yuan suddenly thought of Tian Ningning. Lin Yuan simply left a message to Tian Ningning on Star Web and said that he was going to fight a celestial stairway duel. Lin Yuan originally thought that Tian Ningning would not be on Star Web at this time, but he did not expect her to reply instantly. After notifying Tian Ningning, Lin Yuan went to the celestial stairway duel as usual. Logically speaking, if others had Lin Yuan's popularity and prestige, they would have already started livestreaming on Star Web. This way they could increase attention and exposure to gain the recognition of their fans. However, even if Lin Yuan ascended the celestial stairway, he was still the same and terrifyingly low profile. Tian Ningning was not disappointed with Lin Yuan's choice. Instead, she admired him a little. Tian Ningning knew that this silver-masked youth would always choose to walk a very righteous path at all times. Along the way, he did not ask for anything and did not procrastinate. The achievements that others saw might only be 1/10 of what this youth had inadvertently revealed. Lin Yuan thought that he would be matched with a difficult opponent this time. In the end, Lin Yuan was matched with only 2 gold 4/elite phase. Lin Yuan checked his opponent's information and found that his opponent was also 0-star on the celestial stairway. He felt that since the opponent had no intention of fighting, he might as well let Chimey use the radiant body to kill the 2 gold 4/elite deer species phase. There were no waves in this duel. Lin Yuan used Black Tiger Afu's tornado to destroy the parking lot. He won his first celestial stairway duel. At that moment, Lin Yuan checked his identity card. Name, Black Gender, Male height, 178 cm weight, 61 kg star tower floor, celestial stairway 1-star spirit chi occupation, healing type professional occupation rank, see exclusive achievement, straight to celestial stairway, ascended the celestial stairway from the star tower without losing a single match. Contracted Fae, Morbius bronze X/legend, 1000 questions beast bronze X/legend, Twilight Starbird silver eye/fantasy eye, Red Thorn silver eye/fantasy eye, Acid Corrosion Queen Bee gold eye/legend, Source Sand gold eye/fantasy eye, Dual record Sad Face star tower, 100 duels 100 wins 0 losses, 100 highest floor, Celestial Stairway promotion duel, 2 duels 2 wins 0 losses, Celestial Stairway, 1 win 0 losses, 0 consecutive wins, 1 highest number of stars. Lin Yuan found that his celestial stairway stars and duel record had changed, and there was an additional exclusive achievement. Chapter 16, end of this chapter. Chapter 323. The opponent that Lin Yuan had just been matched with had been tossing and turning between the celestial stairway and the promotion duel. Lin Yuan had personally sent him down the celestial stairway. After seeing Lin Yuan's duel in the Celestial Stairway video library, Tian Ningning realized that she actually did not know how to write about this duel record. For an exclusive reporter, the real difficulty was not to write about an exciting and evenly matched duel. The real difficulty was this kind of duel that ended in a few seconds. Tian Ningning wrote the duel record in the most authentic style. Therefore, for this duel record that she did not know how to write, Tian Ningning intended to be like this duel that ended in 2 seconds. She would just write 2 words, instant kill, and that would be it. After Lin Yuan finished the Celestial Stairway duel, he could not help but feel a little puzzled. Was it because he was unlucky during the promotion duel and had encountered strong opponents like Qin Hongfeng and Poison Beauty? Or was it because he was too lucky after reaching the Celestial Stairway and had encountered duelists with strength that should not have appeared on the Celestial Stairway? Lin Yuan had just gone through the trial and did not intend to hone his combat skills on Star Web again. Although Red Thorn had just become a silver/fantasy breed, there was obviously no effect on a place like Star Web to increase his combat compatibility with Red Thorn. This was because Star Web and duels were not enough for Red Thorn to show the strength of the Sea of Flowers after reaching Silver Eye/Fantasy Eye. Therefore Lin Yuan did not continue with the next Star Web duel. Instead he withdrew his identity as Black, a combat class spirit chi professional. Then he logged on to Star Web as a creation master. Black Star Web usually only received Tian Ningning's Star Web messages. However, Lin Yuan's Star Web messages as a creation master were always in a full state. Lin Yuan could not read such a huge amount of messages no matter how hard he tried. Lin Yuan simply stopped looking at the messages from strangers. Anyway, these people came to find him for a small matter. They either wanted to buy a large number of elite spirit siphon goldfish and silver usnias. They also asked if he had extra flower brocade pearls to exchange. Of course, most of these messages were asking if Lin Yuan had any bronze/epic phase to trade. After all, Nothing could attract the attention of a spirit chi professional who had comprehended a willpower rune more than a bronze/epic fae. Even if there was, it would probably only be a bronze/legend fae. If someone announced that they wanted to buy a bronze/legend fae, everyone would probably think that the person was a fool. Either that or he drank alcohol and took cephalosporin. However, at that moment he suddenly realized that someone had actually sent him a message in his friend list in the past few days. Lin Yuan's creation master status was the same as Black's, which was a spirit chi professional. There weren't many friends. Other than the braised egghead who would occasionally come and talk to him, and Zhou Xian who would occasionally talk to him about the store's dividends, Zhou Xian was the only exception. Very few people would add Lin Yuan as a friend. However, Lin Yuan found that Listen, who occupied one of his friend's slots, had sent him 3 messages a few days ago. Lin Yuan clicked on it and raised his brows before frowning slightly. Listen, expert, I wonder if you can enhance contracted bronze/flawless phase and upgrade them from flawless to epic? Listen, Guru, if it's possible, I would like to ask for a chance. You can name a price as long as I can afford it. Listen, Guru, it's urgent. Please help me. Lin Yuan could feel the anxiety in Listen's message. According to Listen's message, Lin Yuan felt that rather than saying that Listen had sent these 3 messages to ask for a trade, it would be better to say that Listen had sent these 3 messages with the intention of asking for help. Obviously, Listen should have encountered some problems. Lin Yuan had previously made a deal with Listen. Lin Yuan's impression of Listen was limited to knowing that he had a high EQ and was extremely good at dealing with interpersonal relationships. Even if he reached a new group, he could quickly integrate into the group through his high EQ and become the center of attention. Just like in Lin Yuan's previous deal with Listen. Listen found that the bronze/epic fae, the pain illusory fox, that Lin Yuan had provided had comprehended an excellent exclusive skill spirit loophole. Listen sent an additional cubic meter of day and night spirit silver as a thank you gift. Could be seen how much Listen cared about making friends with Lin Yuan. Now Listen had used the word beg in the 3 messages. This word was equivalent to Listen exhausting the friendly relationship that he had just established with Lin Yuan. Obviously, Listen should be at his wit's end. If he wanted to buy a bronze/epic fae on the market, it was still possible to participate in more auctions. If he could happen to buy a suitable bronze/epic fae through bartering or auctions, it would be equivalent to hitting the jackpot. However, if he wanted to find a creation master to help him upgrade his phase quality from bronze to epic, he would need to find a creation master to help him upgrade his phase quality to epic. That was completely different from directly buying a bronze/epic fae. Looking for a creation master to help him improve his contracted phase quality, at the very least he had to be able to invite a creation master. Moreover, to be able to improve a bronze/flawless fae to epic, it meant that the creation master had to be at least class 4. In fact, he had to be at least an intermediate class 4 creation master to be confident that he could definitely improve a bronze/flawless fae to epic. In this world, if there were any resources that were the most scarce, it would definitely be the resources of creation masters. Otherwise, the status of creation masters would not be so respected in this world. There were not many class 4 creation masters in the entire Radiance Federation. There were less than 20 pinnacle class 4 creation masters. There were only 3 class 5 creation masters. Every class 4 and above creation master's energy was unparalleled and shocking. If a class 4 creation master wanted to take on the task of nurturing a fae, countless factions would probably rush to contribute resources just to get a chance to improve the phase quality and grade. Therefore, it was not easy to invite a class 4 creation master to improve a phase quality from flawless to epic. Moreover, Listen did not set the upper limit of the price he could pay in this transaction. This meant that Listen did not hesitate to use all his resources to exchange for such a chance to improve the phase quality. Lin Yuan had a rather good impression of Listen. If Listen could pay a sufficient price for this transaction, he would be willing to accept it. Lin Yuan did not mind helping Listen. Chapter 17, end of this chapter. Chapter 324. This was because it might be difficult for intermediate class 4 creation masters to upgrade a bronze fae from flawless to epic. However, it was a piece of cake for Lin Yuan and he could do it easily. Lin Yuan might as well just return from below. Deep Mountain Elder Lin. 3 source type items can be considered. Since Lisan's message had been sent a few days ago, Lin Yuan did not expect Lisan to reply to his message now. Ever since Lin Yuan had received the circular item that the Mother of Bloodbath had thrown to him, he had the idea of collecting more source type items to store. The source type items that the Mother of Bloodbath found strange and useless were exactly what he needed the most. The value of source type items varied from person to person. There were no useless source type items, only people who were suitable for them. Therefore, source type items would always be a very precious and irreplaceable resource. In short, there was no harm in collecting more source type items. After logging off Star Web, Lin Yuan found that Genius was already lying on its back on the bed, sleeping soundly. Lin Yuan quietly went over, pulled the quilt and covered Genius with it. Lin Yuan felt that he still did not feel sleepy. He took out the weed-like dragon's mouth orchid from his diamond face storage box, which he had picked in the depths of the endless deep forest. He was going to nurture it. He took out the normal dragon's mouth orchid that he had picked in the depths of the endless forest. Lin Yuan looked at it for a moment and found that he really could not see that it was an orchid fay without using Morbius True Data. This was because most orchid fays were no different from weeds when they did not bloom at normal. This dragon's mouth orchid was not much different from the white jade snow orchid that Lin Yuan had obtained previously. It was a normal fay that could not bloom. If one really wanted to distinguish carefully, this dragon's mouth orchid's slender leaves had a few faint gradual patterns compared to the white jade snow orchid. The leaves were also more slender. Although orchid fays were not special when they did not bloom, as long as they bloomed, they would live up to the reputation of being a gentleman among flowers. Among the plum blossoms, orchid, bamboo and chrysanthemum, orchid fays were considered a relatively precious type of fay. The white jade snow orchid that Lin Yuan had nurtured previously was not considered a superior orchid. However, the dragon's mouth orchid that Lin Yuan was holding in his hand was a rather famous species among the superior orchids. He took the normal dragon's mouth orchid into the spirit lock spatial zone. He began to circulate his spiritual power to strengthen the dragon's mouth orchid. The normal dragon's mouth orchid had been constantly increasing its quality and grade in Lin Yuan's hands. When this dragon's mouth orchid broke through to the bronze rank, within those thin and long orchid leaves that carried a gradual change in color, a thick and sturdy flower bud directly sprang out, the bud producing a large dark blue flower bud. While Lin Yuan was constantly injecting spiritual power into the dragon's mouth orchid, the huge flower bud was also constantly unfolding. When the dragon's mouth orchid was upgraded to bronze X/epic, the flower buds of the dragon's mouth orchid had already bloomed. The dark blue and bewitching dragon's mouth orchid was the size of a palm. Each dragon's mouth orchid only had one bud, and each bud only had one flower. The dragon's mouth orchid had a very unique orchid shape, just like the tongue of a dragon species fay. In the middle of the dragon's mouth orchid's flower core, there were fine, scale-like woody tissues. Under the illumination of light, these woody tissues would faintly reflect light. It was as though there was a layer of dragon species fay scales on the surface. Although these scales would reflect light, they felt like velvet and were very magical. When the dragon's mouth orchid bloomed, Lin Yuan smelled a very rich fragrance that made people feel intoxicated when they smelled it. The smell of the dragon's mouth orchid wasn't actually bad, as it was simply too rich. It was so rich that it made people feel a little greasy. However, the value of the dragon's mouth orchid's flower didn't lie in whether the flower's fragrance was good or not. It was because the dragon's mouth orchid's flower could allow fays with dragon species bloodlines to stimulate their hidden bloodline. This was the reason why the dragon's mouth orchid was considered a high-grade orchid among the orchid fays. Lin Yuan didn't have the slightest hesitation and immediately broke off the dragon's mouth orchid's blooming dark blue flower from the stem. If the dragon's mouth orchid wanted to ensure that the dragon's mouth orchid would be able to awaken the phase dragon species bloodline to the greatest extent, it had to be plucked when the dragon's mouth orchid was in full bloom. Otherwise, if it was a little late, the dragon's mouth orchid's dark blue flower would wilt and lose a portion of its effects. The dragon's mouth orchid's flowering period was very short. After blooming, the dragon's mouth orchid could only bloom for less than an hour. Therefore, when creation masters nurtured the dragon's mouth orchid, they had to be very careful. Otherwise, by the time they returned from doing something else, the dragon's mouth orchid that they had painstakingly nurtured would have withered. Lin Yuan might pluck the massive dark blue dragon's mouth orchid from the dragon's mouth orchid. However, Lin Yuan didn't intend to use this dragon's mouth orchid to awaken Blackie's dragon species bloodline. This was because the higher the quality of a fey like the dragon's mouth orchid, the better the dragon's mouth orchid's effect on awakening the dragon species bloodline. This dragon's mouth orchid was condensed under the dragon's mouth orchid's epic quality, not legendary quality. Therefore, this dragon's mouth orchid's dark blue dragon's mouth orchid's epic quality could not awaken Blackie's dragon species bloodline to the greatest extent. Lin Yuan planned to keep this dragon's mouth orchid's epic dark blue dragon's mouth orchid as a resource to exchange for other resources. Most of the dragon's mouth orchids that could appear in the market were light blue, which was the dragon's mouth orchid's flawless quality. Almost no one had heard of a dark blue dragon's mouth orchid's epic dragon's mouth orchid appearing in the market. The dragon's mouth orchid's quality determined the ability of the dragon's mouth orchid's dragon species bloodline. The dragon's mouth orchid's grade determined the time it needed to bloom a dragon's mouth orchid. The dragon's mouth orchid was a fey that had extremely high requirements for spirit chi concentration. In the spirit lock spatial zone, a large amount of pure spirit chi could allow the dragon's mouth orchid to bloom another dragon's mouth orchid relatively quickly. Chapter 18, End of this chapter. Chapter 325. If a normal creation master nurtured the dragon's mouth orchid in the outside world, it would depend on the creation master's ability. If a Class 3 creation master wanted to nurture a bronze dragon's mouth orchid to bloom once, it would take about a year. If a Class 4 creation master nurtured the dragon's mouth orchid, it would take 9 months to produce a single dragon's mouth orchid. However, when Lin Yuan sensed the dragon's mouth orchid's state in the spirit lock spatial zone, he found that it would take 4 months for it to bloom again even in the spirit lock spatial zone. However, Lin Yuan did not care about this. This was because he had decided to upgrade this bronze X/epic dragon's mouth orchid to legend. After the dragon's mouth orchid was upgraded to legend, it would immediately produce a dragon's mouth orchid and would not need to wait for the flowering period. Since Lin Yuan wanted to use the dragon's mouth orchid to stimulate Blackie's dragon species bloodline, he would use the best one. Therefore, Lin Yuan planned to find time to nurture this dragon's mouth orchid and upgrade it from epic to legend. If the legend dragon's mouth orchid produced a dragon's mouth orchid, to what extent would it stimulate Blackie's dragon species bloodline? Lin Yuan was still looking forward to it. If he could stimulate the dragon species bloodline in Blackie's body before it became a fantasy breed, Blackie would be able to do so. Then when Blackie became a fantasy breed, it would have more chances to undergo a racial transition due to the bloodline purification. It would allow the dragon species bloodline in its body to slowly devour the fish species bloodline and undergo a racial transition toward a dragon species fey. Lin Yuan really hoped that Blackie could quickly upgrade its grade. This was because if Blackie could advance to a fantasy breed and quickly increase its grade, the spirit gather goldfish would be extremely valuable. Then, according to the effect of Blackie's exclusive skill Spirit Chi Imprint, it could increase the speed at which Lin Yuan's Spirit Chi Imprint accumulated Spirit Chi. It was unknown how many times Blackie's exclusive skill Spirit Chi Imprint had helped Lin Yuan a lot. It was simply considered a great trump card for Lin Yuan. The Spirit Gather Goldfish Blackie was only at Bronze X/Legend, and the spiritual power that it could release at any moment was not considered a lot. If the Spirit Gather Goldfish could become a Silver/Fantasy breed, the Spirit Chi that the Spirit Gather Goldfish could store would be 10 times more than it was now. However, Lin Yuan was rather melancholic as he did not know when he would be able to comprehend a suitable willpower rune for Blackie. However, he did not intend to enhance the dragon's mouth orchid to the legend quality now. Given his current ability, it would still take him 5 days to upgrade a bronze/epic fey to legend. It had been too long and he had other things to do recently. Therefore he could only delay this matter for now. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly recalled the grayish avian fey that he had found in the endless forest. It was nearly 50 centimeters tall and had a wingspan of nearly 1 meter. With Morbius True data, Lin Yuan had already confirmed that this gray avian fey was a crane species fey. However, due to the crane species phase genetic model not being able to develop without sufficient spirit qi concentration, all of its characteristics were hidden. Based on true data, Lin Yuan was unable to identify the species of this crane species Fei. Therefore, Lin Yuan summoned this crane species Fei from his diamond Fei storage box. This crane species Fei had been sick and listless in the diamond Fei storage box. When it was suddenly summoned, Lin Yuan could clearly feel that this crane species Fei was panicking and fearful, appearing very weak and helpless. Lin Yuan saw this little fellow trying its best to shrink its body, trying its best to reduce its presence. Lin Yuan paused what he was about to do. This little fellow was clearly nervous and afraid, but it was so weak that it could not even make more movements. Lin Yuan had also felt this deep sense of powerlessness when he had first brought Zhou Xian to survive 10 years ago. However, after gritting his teeth and enduring it, Lin Yuan understood that there was no weight in this world that his shoulders could not carry. Lin Yuan circulated the spiritual power in his body and injected a large amount of pure spiritual power into this gray little fellow's body through his hands. After a long while, the dusty little guy slowly moved. Once he injected spiritual power, Lin Yuan knew how terrible the situation inside this crane species Fei was. At the same time, he was secretly shocked. What kind of crane species Fei is this? It actually requires such a large amount of pure spiritual power to slowly develop the genetic model in its body. Based on this crane species Fei's current situation, it simply could not survive in nature. When this gray little fellow sensed Lin Yuan's injection of spirit qi, it weakly opened its half-squinted eyes. Lin Yuan saw that this gray little fellow's eyes were like the purest black gemstones. It might be a little dim, but it had an elegant and intelligent look. Lin Yuan reached out to tidy up the crane Fei's dusty feathers and found that there was a lot of dust and some leaf fragments between its feathers. Lin Yuan brought this crane out of the spirit lock spatial zone, just like how he had bathed Genius. Carefully, he helped the dusty little guy take a bath. Then Lin Yuan wiped the gray feathers on this little fellow's body. After Lin Yuan's cleaning, this crane Fei might still be gray, but it was much more spirited. Lin Yuan brought this gray little fellow back into the spirit lock spatial zone. He injected a large amount of pure spiritual power into this normal crane species Fei. 1 hour later, Lin Yuan stopped what he was doing. This crane Fei's genetic model was seriously lacking and it couldn't be rushed. It could only be nurtured slowly. Therefore, this gray crane species Fei needed to live in the spirit lock spatial zone for a period of time to slowly recover. Lin Yuan planned to nurture this crane Fei in the spirit lock spatial zone. However, just as Lin Yuan was preparing to exit the spirit lock spatial zone, he realized that this gray little fellow was actually much more clingy than Genius. Perhaps it had never experienced the warmth of being cared for. At that moment, this gray crane species Fei widened its black gemstone-like eyes and looked at Lin Yuan with a pitiful yet affectionate expression. Lin Yuan rubbed the crane species Fei's small head. He brought this crane species Fei to the cinnabar sweet osmanthus and placed it on the cinnabar sweet osmanthus branches that had green leaves. 4 crane species Feis, their bloodline evolution path was completely different from the phoenix bloodline. Chapter 19, end of this chapter. Chapter 327. At that moment, the bald skinny man Old Feng was flabbergasted. Old Song, who was as fat as a glutinous rice ball, took out his pen and switched the position of the Abyss Dimensional Rift and the Alien Insect Dimensional Rift on the proposal. The original 8 Class 2 Abyss Dimensional Rifts and 12 Pinnacle Class 1 Alien Insect Dimensional Rifts had been changed to 8 Class 2 Alien Insect Dimensional Rifts and 12 Pinnacle Class 1 Demon Dimensional Rifts. Old Song, this change is too ruthless. From the point of view of the skinny bald man, this exchange was undoubtedly equivalent to increasing the strength of low-level combat power while also increasing a large amount of high-level combat power. The terror of the Class 2 Alien Insect Dimensional Rift was not something that the Class 2 Abyss Dimensional Rift could compare to. The number of dimensional life forms was at least 5 times more. Furthermore, the low-grade combat units in the Class 1 Dimensional Rift had been changed to the strongest individual dimensional rift, the Abyss Dimensional Rift. This simple change had increased the difficulty of the test by several folds. At that moment, the bald skinny man Old Feng heard Old Song, who was as fat as a glutinous rice ball, speak in a serious tone. If we don't create a huge wave, how will we be able to find the real gold? Just as dawn was about to arrive, this plan, which only had a few words but had been hesitating for an entire night, was sent to the ordinary middle-aged man who was seated on the Imperial Court Council's 13 seats. This ordinary middle-aged man looked at this proposal for a long time. Finally, he stood up and personally made a trip to the Star Web's officials. However, everything was hidden in the morning light and no one knew about it. The blazing sun rose from the east and the morning light shone on Lin Yuan's face. It woke Lin Yuan up from his slumber. Lin Yuan stretched his body and washed up. He then brought the half-asleep genius downstairs. Genius only felt warm in Lin Yuan's hand and soon fell asleep again, snoring softly. Lin Yuan simply placed Genius on the water rhinoceros leather sofa in the living room on the first floor. He allowed Genius to have a good rest on the soft water rhinoceros leather sofa. Genius might have evolved into a 1,000 questions beast, but it had evolved from a housekeeping beast like the 100 questions beast. The 100 questions beast was a feline that loved to sleep. Genius had already broken through the 100 questions beast's racial limit and evolved into a Bronze X/Legend 1,000 questions beast. However, he still didn't change his habit of sleeping. However, Lin Yuan realized that at this time last year, Genius could sleep for more than 16 hours. And now, although Genius seemed to be a little lazy every day, it didn't have any problems. But as long as he slept for about 10 hours he would be fine. At this time, Wuxia had already placed breakfast on the table. Ever since Lin Yuan, Wuxia and Wenyu had moved into the mansion, as long as Wuxia was in the morning, he would prepare breakfast almost every morning. Today's breakfast was honey pancakes, hot nut porridge and freshly squeezed banana milk. However, the rich aroma of the food made Lin Yuan, who had just woken up from his sleep and had an empty stomach, hungry. Wuxia's breakfast this morning was obviously much more than before. Wenyu, who was helping Wuxia set the table, rolled her eyes at Wuxia. He did not need to guess to know that Wuxia must have asked her how much she could eat for breakfast. Lin Yuan felt that Wuxia was simply too straight. How could he ask a girl how much she could eat in a meal? If Lin Yuan were to make breakfast, he would definitely ask Wenyu euphemistically if 4 bowls of rice was enough to save her from embarrassment. Since Hu Quan's arrival, the dining utensils in the mansion had changed. Previously, the utensils were porcelain utensils made of ores or metal utensils made of metal spiritual materials. However, with the addition of Hu Quan, a hidden quasi-class 5 spirit craftsman, the dining utensils in the mansion had become completely jade-textured wood sculpted utensils. Lin Yuan looked at these completely jade-textured wood utensils and the honey pancakes on the utensils and could not help but sigh. Using these completely jade-textured wood utensils to hold food had a natural and refreshing feeling. It was simply the best choice. Wuxia had seen the mother of bloodbaths and endless summers appetites yesterday. He no longer felt that when you could eat. In the morning, Wuxia deliberately got up half an hour earlier and baked a few more pots of honey pancakes. They were obviously prepared for the mother of bloodbath and endless summer. After a while, the mother of bloodbath and endless summer also came out of the room. The mother of bloodbath came out of the room and sniffed as it came to the dining table. Looking at the breakfast on the table, the mother of bloodbath could not help but swallow its saliva. The mother of bloodbath was a foodie and loved to eat all kinds of delicacies. In the mother of bloodbath's opinion, Wuxia's cooking skills were much more delicious than those of the Spirit Food Pavilion's chefs. Therefore, when the mother of bloodbath saw Wuxia's breakfast, it felt that it was time to leave the gourmet group. That was because the mother of bloodbath discovered that the delicacies recommended by the members in the gourmet group were clearly not on the same level as Wuxia's. Wuxia made a lot of honey pancakes and nut porridge. Therefore, the mother of bloodbath and endless summer could completely let loose and eat to their heart's content. After eating, Lin Yuan thought about his decision to establish a guild club and said to Wuxia, "Brother Lu, I want to build a club-like guild. Are you interested in joining?" Upon hearing Lin Yuan's question, Wuxia revealed an honest and heartfelt smile on his face. He quickly nodded and said, "Lin Yuan, if you hadn't asked me, I would have asked you in the next 2 days if you had any plans to establish a guild club." In Wuxia's opinion, not only was Lin Yuan talented, but he was also very strong. Moreover, Lin Yuan also planned to compete for the Radiance 100 sequence, so there was no reason not to go to the S tournament to gallop and compete. Lin Yuan's combat style was very comprehensive, and it was not easy to define it according to convention. Lin Yuan grasped the responsibilities of healing-type spirit qi professionals, support-type spirit qi professionals and combat-class spirit qi professionals. It could be said that Lin Yuan's combat style was considered an all-rounder. Therefore Lin Yuan could join any guild club in his situation. As long as he used his identity as black and expressed his intention to join a guild club. Most guild clubs would probably come to invite Lin Yuan. However, joining a guild club established by others might allow him to participate in the S tournament, but he would also lose the absolute initiative. Lu Jie felt that Lin Yuan's establishment of a guild club was undoubtedly the best choice. I have stories to prepare good wine for you. End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.